Chapter 704. 7 spots of light bloomed brightly. The flickering light was extremely bright, especially the spot of light at the top. It was like the leader of the stars, extremely eye-catching. The 7 spots of light formed a large spine, while the rest of the smaller spots of light were of different brightness, as though they were filled with blood and flesh, filling the entire painting with color. The scene in front of him was blurry. Lin Feng was completely shocked. This was the first time he had seen such a scene. But this is definitely not the Phoenix constellation. Lin Feng was very sure. In his own life spirit, there was the existence of the Phoenix astrolabe. The 7 spots of light formed the huge skeleton of the Phoenix, but the positions were completely different. But this should be my natal constellation. Could it be? Lin Feng was extremely shocked. He did not expect. He actually had 2 natal constellations. How shocking. It should be because I cultivate both the human and life spirit. Lin Feng said lightly. Even Duo said that this was an extremely rare accident. Most of the martial artists who dual cultivate, either dual cultivate Battle God and Martial God, or dual cultivate Heaven Spirit Master and Heaven Spirit Master, but they all have one thing in common. They only cultivate one soul. He had cultivated 2 souls. It was an all-round improvement. 2 natal constellations. I'm afraid no one would believe it. Lin Feng smiled. He did not know if he should be happy or sad. Maybe the 2 natal constellations were very special, but it meant that he had to cultivate twice as long as others. Was it a blessing or a curse? This is the will of the heavens. Lin Feng thought lightly. He did not care too much. If it was a blessing, it would not be a curse. If it was a curse, he would not be able to avoid it. The road he was walking on might be rough, but he had already walked it. At least, he was very strong now. Every effort, every gain. But what would the natal constellation of the battle god be? Lin Feng felt a little curious. At this moment, the blurry spots of light in front of him were constantly flickering, becoming brighter, as though a faraway scene was slowly moving in front of him. Lin Feng's heartbeat quickened. The scene in front of him gradually became clearer. The outline of a giant appeared. It was extremely domineering. So tall, so powerful, robust physique, and thick limbs. Unlike humans, it's actually like a giant beast. Lin Feng pondered as his senses became clearer and clearer. But in an instant, the image disappeared. Lin Feng opened his eyes and returned to reality. It was still that familiar world of giant trees. The rich aura of wood permeated the surroundings. Time passed faintly. A gentle breeze blew past, and the leaves of the giant trees rustled. He had already returned. It's a pity that I didn't get to see the whole thing. After all, my star control is only at 8th gear. When I reach 9th gear, I should be able to clearly see it. Lin Feng nodded, feeling a little regretful. Just a little more, and he would be able to see the true appearance of the natal constellation. He was extremely curious. However, there was nothing he could do. Next, when the original star power stabilizes and the star rings appear, I can begin to sense the power of the constellations. Try to cultivate the 9th level of star control. Lin Feng thought to himself. The steps were very clear. This was the difference between having a master and not having one. With a master's guidance, not only would one's knowledge and experience be enriched, but it would also save one's cultivation time and avoid many detours. When a Starry Sea grade martial artist reached the 9th level of star levels, they should first cultivate the 9th level of star control before trying to reach the 10th level. After all, from a 9th level to the 10th level of star levels, the energy and time consumed far exceeded that of comprehending the 9th level of star control. Master is right. If I can reach the 10th level first, then comprehending star control will be twice the result with half the effort. Because of the star rings, Lin Feng smiled faintly and closed his eyes. He immersed himself in cultivation. Time passed quickly. Perhaps in the outside world, it would take a lot of time to stabilize the 10th level of star levels and manifest the star rings. However, in this world of giant trees, it was too easy. The time ratio was 300:1. Even if a year passed in this world of giant trees, it would only be a day in the outside world. The fog of the star rings has completely condensed. According to Master, the higher the density of the star rings, the bigger the diameter of the star rings and the bigger the ellipse, which means the sensing ability of the natal constellation is stronger. At the weakest level, the color of the star rings is the same as the light ball. At the middle level, the color of the star rings is divided into different layers. At the top level, the more layers there are, the clearer the star rings are, which means the aptitude is better and the sensing ability is stronger. Legend has it that the star rings of martial artists with top aptitude will even glow faintly. Lin Feng thought for a bit and smiled. As expected, his war god aptitude was very ordinary. Luckily, the color of the star rings was divided into 2 layers. According to the classification of the 3 levels, he was in the middle level. At least, he wasn't the worst. No wonder Duo said that with my war god aptitude, reaching the Star Lord level is the limit. The sensing ability of a Star Lord level martial artist is very important. If it's only ordinary, then even if you barely reach the Star Lord level, your achievements will be limited. This was aptitude. It was like moving thousands of kilograms of goods. Those who were strong could finish moving in less than an hour. Those who were weak couldn't finish moving even after 3 days and nights. They might even be crushed by the goods or die of exhaustion. However, there was always a chance. There was always a chance. Aptitude could be changed. Perhaps one day, that powerless person would eat some kind of miraculous elixir and be reborn, becoming a person with great strength. This was called fortune. I hope the blood inheritance of the ancient divine beast Thunder Mantis is really effective. Otherwise, without Duodua's help, my path to becoming a war god will probably stop at the Star-Lord level. Lin Feng's eyes glittered. Whoosh! Starlight dazzled. A thick red light gathered around Lin Feng's body. Veins bulged on his forehead. Lin Feng clenched his fists, and the red light kept gathering in his hands. An increase in the number of stars meant an increase in the amount of astral power that could be controlled. Normal martial artists could only control 1/10 of the number of stars. For example, for 8 stars, if one's astral power was 100, then one could control 10 stars, which would be the 8th grade. For 9 stars, one's astral power was 1,000, so one had to control 100 stars to reach the 9th grade. That was the difference in astral power. 10 times more. It was like 2 people fighting. One was using 1/10 of his strength, while the other was using 1/10 of his strength. Naturally, the power would be different. Once one's astral power reached the 7th grade, the difference in strength between each grade would be huge. That was why Lin Feng had been at a disadvantage against Wan Macho that day. Wan Macho's astral power had reached the 10th grade, which was the peak of the Star Sea state. Lin Feng, on the other hand, had only reached the 8th grade. Pa! Clap! Clap! Astral power continued to bloom. Lin Feng's veins bulged, and his eyes were filled with determination. I can do it. If I can't even reach the 9th grade, how can I reach the 10th grade? I must reach the peak of the Star Sea state. If others can do it, then I, Lin Feng, can do it too. The determination in his heart was very deep. The red starlight gathered in his hands and became more and more intense. Lin Feng's willpower was far stronger than other martial artists. Plus, his life spirit had the foundation of astral power control, so it was very easy for him to master the astral power. The red starlight gathered, little by little, until, the starlight bloomed and disappeared. Lin Feng staggered. His face was pale, and he gasped for breath. Just a little bit more, and he would have succeeded. 0.9%. Only 0.1% left. Lin Feng's eyes were shining, and his breath gradually calmed down. Normally, the 9th grade astral power should be able to control 10% of the astral power. However, his astral power was now at the 10th grade, which was 10 times more than the 9th grade. 7 times. After 7 times, Lin Feng had mastered the control of astral power. The more astral power a martial artist had, the better they could sense it. It was naturally easier to control the astral power with half the effort. 3 days later, bang! The starlight exploded, and a red aura surrounded his body. Lin Feng's muscles suddenly changed and condensed. His strength burst out. Compared to the 8th grade, the astral power unleashed at the 9th grade was more condensed and stronger. My constitution has been strengthened 10 times. Lin Feng's eyes were burning. It's 8 times stronger than the 8th grade. I've completely mastered the first step of the 9th grade. His constitution had been strengthened 10 times, which was already at the peak of the Star Sea state. Even the 10th grade astral power could only strengthen his constitution by 10 times. Of course, there was a huge difference between the 10th grade and the 9th grade. Whether or not he could reach the Star-Lord state was already a big difference. The second step is to comprehend the power of the constellation. My natal constellation. Lin Feng nodded, his eyes sparkling. That magical image appeared in his mind again. It was like a giant beast roaring at the sky, mighty and domineering. That was his natal constellation. Perhaps my constellation's sensing ability is indeed not strong and is merely at the middle level, but Lin Feng smiled faintly. The astral treasure staff appeared in his hand in an instant. It flashed with a light radiance and could greatly enhance the sensing ability with the stars. Plus, my astral multiplicity has reached the 10th grade, and I have a star ring. Comprehending the power of the constellation, it shouldn't be difficult. Lin Feng nodded confidently. For other martial artists, this was the most difficult step, but for him, it was easy. Instantly, whoosh, the astral staff flashed. Lin Feng was immersed in cultivation. The original astral power in his soul was vivid in his mind. He could sense it clearly. He seemed to have entered the red light, and his mind was immersed in the star ring. It was like returning to his mother's embrace. It was very warm. A gentle call sounded in his mind. A familiar power seemed to be awakening in his blood. Slowly, gently, the feeling was getting deeper and more familiar. It was as if there was everything he wanted in the place in front of him that was within his reach. In a daze, Lin Feng entered a magical state. He felt an extremely domineering and powerful energy, but it was very intimate, as if it was a part of his body. It was the first time, and he had already comprehended the power of the constellation. How shocking! That is, Lin Feng was extremely surprised. The virtual image in front of his eyes slowly materialized. This time, he was able to see the shining light diagram for real. His natal constellation. Updated. Chapter 705. It had a strong physique and was domineering. Its limbs were not long, but they were thick and strong. Its entire body was filled with strong muscles and was filled with a terrifying power. A tiny tail flashed, and the eyes of the giant beast flashed with a bright and resplendent luster. That was bear, a big and tall bear. My Aries star constellation should be the Ursa major constellation. Muttering in his heart, Lin Feng looked at the giant bear and felt a sense of familiarity. Maybe its expression was ferocious and domineering, like the king of giant beasts. Its bright eyes seemed to be able to see through his heart. But, strangely, his heart was filled with warmth, as though he was very close to the giant bear. That feeling, although it was not as good as the phoenix, it still made his heart flutter. It was as though one was his parents and the other was his brother and sister. It was as though blood was thicker than water. In an instant, an extremely strong force appeared. Lin Feng's heart trembled violently as he felt a strange change in his body. An abnormally strong aura was channeled into his body. In his mind, the giant bear seemed to have opened its bloody mouth and roared towards the sky. The roar reverberated in his ears and shook his heart. The energy flowed in his body and brought along a strong gold aura. It passed through his meridians and caused his body to change. Lin Feng was stunned. Many small meridians in his body were opened up. That powerful energy flow flowed through his body, fusing with his cells, his bones, and his skin strengthened, continuously strengthened. Marrow cleansing body? This is not the 9th gear. Lin Feng was shocked, but he was pleasantly surprised. Comprehending the constellation and being able to use the constellation's power meant that his star control had reached the ninth gear. But this was using, not occupying. Comprehension was also divided into levels. The first level was like building a bridge, like a man and a woman getting to know each other for the first time. They could talk to each other and have a good impression of each other. This was the ninth gear. The second level was a deeper level of relationship. They could become boyfriend and girlfriend and be sweet. At this moment, just like now, the power of the constellations had descended. It was as if they had acknowledged the relationship between them. In terms of star control, it had already surpassed the ninth level. In fact, this was the first step to reaching the 10th level of star control. According to what you said, this is the 9.5 rank. Lin Feng smiled, very satisfied. The 9.5 gear was the most crucial step in stepping into the 10th gear. It could only be obtained when the number of stars reached the 10th level. This was also the reason why his Phoenix constellation as a celestial spirit master was still stuck at the 9th gear. Being able to step into 9.5 means that sooner or later, I will be able to comprehend 10th gear. The possibility is more than 80%. Lin Feng's lips curled. He was very confident that his god of war would become a Star Lord. 9.5 gears were like a guiding light. The constellation power cleanses the body. Firstly, it allows the body to get used to the constellation power. Secondly, it prepares the body to comprehend the power of the stars. Thirdly, improve your body and lay a foundation for reaching the Star Lord level. The strength of each constellation is different. I wonder how much I can improve. Lin Feng smiled faintly, looking forward to it. Although he didn't know much about constellations, his body's foundation was there. No matter how much he improved, it would be the icing on the cake. He had learned from the battle with Juan Macho that his body was far beyond the peak of the Star Sea state. Juan Macho had also undergone the cleansing of her body, but so what? In the battle that day, her body was far weaker than his. The next time they met, the difference in physical strength would be even greater. Wait, Lin Feng was shocked. He seemed to have thought of something. He looked inside his body and saw that the powerful energy currents were still circulating in his body, passing through all the veins like rivers flowing to the sea. Many roads in his body had been opened, as if the blocked channels had been opened. I understand. Lin Feng clenched his fists. I haven't been able to reach the 10th level of Emperor Shun's Earth Qi these days. This is what I'm lacking. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. He was very certain. He had been studying the 10th level of Emperor Shun's Earth Qi for so many days. He had tried all kinds of methods. He had a deep understanding of the 10th level of Emperor Shun's Earth Qi. Although these small veins were small and insignificant, but their use was crucial. 10 days. I only need 10 days at most for my Emperor Shun's Earth Qi to break through. Reach the 10th level. Lin Feng clenched his fists in excitement. He had finally reaped the fruits of his hard work. Hard work pays off. Indeed, Lin Feng's constellation sensing ability could only be considered ordinary. But this place was the Wood Spirit Land. Although the Wood Spirit Qi was strong, all kinds of origin energy had the same destination. The density of the Spirit Qi naturally brought about a connection with the power of the stars, making it much easier. In addition, Lin Feng had a heaven-defying existence like the Astral Treasure Staff. Together with the 10 layers of star gravity, reaching the 9.5 level of star control power was unexpected, but it was reasonable. Even if he couldn't reach the 9.5 level the first time, he could try a few more times. However, Lin Feng's comprehension ability was indeed amazing. To be able to master the method, comprehend, and cultivate, this was comprehension ability. In just the first time, Lin Feng reached the 9.5 level. It was obvious. Time passed bit by bit. The first time he merged with the constellation power, his body's strength had increased by a lot. It was similar to the first time he channeled the star power. The extent of the increase depends on the strength of the constellation sensing ability. The stronger it is, the more constellation power will descend. It is like a gift. Secondly, it depends on the constellation power of the natal constellation. Every constellation is different. Lin Feng said softly and suddenly smiled. At this moment, the constellation power in his body had been digested. Master said that the natal constellation of the god of war will increase the strength of the body the most, because the body's capacity is stronger. Normally, the increase is about 1 time, and some can even reach 5 times. And for me, it is about 4 times. Lin Feng smiled and was quite satisfied. He was only 1 step away from 5 times. It was enough. The constellation power improves the body's foundation, and my body's foundation is far better than other warriors. This 4 times increase is probably more than double that of other gods of war. The stronger the body, the easier it would be to break through to the Star Lord level. It also meant that after the breakthrough, he would be stronger. But for him, this was not the happiest thing. After all, the constellation power would descend sooner or later, and his body strength would increase sooner or later. This was a passive process, and it was only a matter of time. There was no suspense. Even if his body's foundation was increased by 1 for times, it was still within his expectations. The biggest change was his earth energy. Emperor Shun's earth energy. 10th level. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Instantly. Bang! A violent aura suddenly spread out from his body. He activated the spirit chi of heaven and earth and the star power in his body and poured it out. The star power and earth energy merged perfectly, shining with a dazzling red light. The red starlight on his fists was extremely bright, and the star power energy was more than 10%. It was 10% of the 10th level. One had to know that he only had 9 levels of star power control, so he could only control 1% of the 10th level. But now, he could control more than 10 times the star power. How shocking. I can control it so well, and there is no feeling of disharmony. Even the constellation power is condensed. This 10th level Emperor Shun's earth energy is so powerful. Lin Feng was amazed, but he did not expect the 10th level Emperor Shun's earth energy to be so powerful. Perhaps it was not as powerful as star power, but it was like a beast tamer taming a powerful beast and easily controlling it. After I master the 10th level Emperor Shun's earth energy, I should be able to control more and more star power. By then, the explosive power of a god of war will be extremely terrifying. Lin Feng nodded secretly and looked forward to it. His earth energy had far surpassed the earth energy of other gods of war. Other gods of war could only control 10% of their star power, but he could control 20% or 30%. When both of them were at the peak of the Star Sea state, and both of them had dozens of levels of star power, the difference would be obvious. Double blessings. Not only did his star power reach 9.5, but the Emperor Shun's earth energy also broke through the bottleneck of the 9th level and reached the 10th level. I didn't expect that I would reach a level that even my teacher couldn't reach by chance. Lin Feng smiled faintly and did not feel proud. He was able to reach the 10th level purely because his luck was better than his teacher's. His teacher only cultivated the path of war, and some of his meridians were blocked, so he could not cultivate. On the other hand, he had everything he needed. However, the real purpose of the Emperor Shun's earth energy reaching the 10th level was not to increase his battle power, but the speed of absorbing the wood energy will greatly increase. Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. Every level of the Emperor Shun's earth energy would increase the speed of absorbing the chi of heaven and earth. In the world of the giant tree, the wood energy was hidden in the chi of heaven and earth. When the two merged, absorbing the chi of heaven and earth meant absorbing the wood energy. Begin. Gather all of your energy and absorb the wood energy. Light up the wood life star plate as soon as possible. Lin Feng's eyes shone, and a thick earth energy surrounded his body. He gathered the star power and soon entered a state of cultivation under the gentle touch of the giant tree's branches. Wisps of wood energy merged with the spirit chi of heaven and earth, but they were all absorbed by Lin Feng at an extremely fast speed. Every minute and every second, The energy in the wood life star plate increased rapidly, and it lit up little by little. At the same time, Lin Feng's physical strength kept increasing as he absorbed the spirit chi of heaven and earth. Cultivating with the Emperor Shun strategy had improved his physical strength, but he could not absorb the star power. But now his star level had reached the 10th level, and his original star power was completely saturated. It was just the right time to use the Emperor Shun strategy, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. First update. Chapter 706. Yinling Manor was in a state of chaos. Fierce Yin sect and Yinling Prefecture were in constant conflicts. Since they had started a war, there was no reason to make peace. The two sides were like fire and water. Only the destruction of one side could resolve the situation. Rumors were everywhere. They were everywhere. In terms of intelligence, Ji Jin was undoubtedly better than Wan Macho. Lin Feng had played a significant role in reviving the death chess board to its current state. However, Ji Jin had also played a significant role in this. Wan Macho's serious injury, Wan Mayo's death, and Yinling Prefecture's loss were exaggerated by Fierce Yin sect. Everyone in Yinling Prefecture knew about it. As for Yinling Prefecture, they kept attacking Fierce Yin sect as if to prove the rumors. However, the more they did so, the more the rumors spread. Yinling Prefecture had a guilty conscience. Many forces were watching covetously, waiting for Fierce Yin sect to start a war with Yinling Prefecture. Many small forces that were restricted by Yinling Prefecture were even more ambitious. They became independent and took the opportunity to attack other small cities. It could be said that a slight move in one part would affect the whole situation. The more chaotic it was, the more opportunities there were. Especially for those ambitious forces, it was a great opportunity. Just like when Jinsha Gang and White Horse Gang joined forces to attack Green Smoke City. Now those big forces dared to act rashly. It was like a lion and a tiger in the forest, staring at each other, neither giving way to the other. The rest of the wild beasts were not restrained and became much freer. If Yinling Prefecture was peaceful, who would dare to start a war for no reason? The shot would hit the bird that poked its head out. Haha, awesome. A burly man stood on the city wall and roared to the sky. Behind him was a dilapidated city made of bricks. At this moment, groups of martial artists entered in a single file. They were ferocious and looted everywhere. The residents in the city cried and yelled. Some wanted to resist, but they were instantly killed by the martial artists with a punch or a kick. They raped and looted, committing all kinds of crimes. Big Brother is amazing. We're rich this time, haha. A man with a scar laughed. The third city. Hey, brothers, we're eating and drinking well this time. Just like what Big Brother said, awesome. A man with an aquiline nose said flatteringly that Yinling Myriad tribe wants to take over Yinling Prefecture. Their ambition is quite big, but unfortunately, their strength is not much. Haha. The burly man laughed arrogantly. Back then, the Yinling clan ruled the entire Yinling Manor. How impressive was that? Didn't they still fall apart? Exactly, the scarred man agreed, and then he was suddenly stunned and couldn't help but ask curiously. But Big Brother, when the Yinling clan split apart all those years ago, why did only the Yinling clan remain? Where did the other branches go? Idiot. The hook-nosed man said disdainfully. Of course it was destroyed by the Wild Feather clan. The scarred man scratched his head and said, if it was destroyed by the Yinling clan, then why didn't the Yinling clan take over the entire Yinling clan? The hook-nosed man was at a loss for words. Both of them couldn't help but look at the burly man. The corner of the burly man's mouth twitched. He waved his hand and shouted, what's the point of mentioning such old history? It's none of our business. After saying that, the burly man patted his chest and said heroically, let's go to the biggest restaurant in the city to celebrate. We're not going home until we're drunk tonight. Great. Awesome. Such a scene happened everywhere in the Yinling clan. In fact, if not for Lin Feng's help that day, Green Smoke City would have fallen by now. Yinling clan had been peaceful for so long, and countless experts from countless factions were holding their breaths. Now, it had completely erupted. The longer the battle between the Yinling clan and fierce Yin sect dragged on, the more chaotic the Yinling clan would become. No one knew what the situation would become, and this was what Juan Macho was worried about back then. The more the situation changed, the more dangerous it would be because it might be beyond the control of the Yinling clan. They had to end the battle quickly. At this moment, no one in the Yinling clan knew that a huge force was ready to make a move. A disaster was about to erupt in the Yinling clan. Land of Wood Spirit. Lin Feng was still cultivating. However, the giant tree world he was in had already changed. 1/3 of the 18 rounds had passed. It had increased from the 300:1 ratio of the giant tree world to 500:1 ratio of the giant tree world. Although the required Wood Spirit heart had increased greatly, Lin Feng could afford it. Now, each round was equivalent to 5,000 days of cultivation. It was quite shocking. Lin Feng's war god aptitude might really not be good enough. However, the cultivation in the world of the giant tree had proved one thing. Diligence makes up for stupidity. Lin Feng had great patience and persevered in his cultivation. As a result, his strength increased steadily. In the Do Spirit world, level 10 star C state could barely be considered a peak star C state, because the meaning of peak was that reaching the peak state was the minimum requirement to break through to the Star Lord level. Of course, there were some warriors who were talented. Even if they hadn't reached level 10, their bodies were strong enough. However, the stronger the body, the higher the chance of success, especially the path of War God. Lin Feng's body glowed. His aura had changed. His skin became tougher, and his body became much stronger. Level 11 star C state. However, Lin Feng's emotions didn't change at all. He was still immersed in cultivation. Lin Feng's expression remained the same. To the current Lin Feng, becoming a battle god wasn't his goal. To break through the star C state bottleneck and reach the Star Lord level, the key was to have level 10 star control and star constellation. This was because his body was far stronger than the so-called peak star C state. The reason why he kept cultivating was because the wood life astrolabe. Almost 1/3. The speed of saturation is quite fast. At this rate, my wood life astrolabe will be 1/3 full every 3 rounds of 10 days. As Lin Feng calculated in his heart, he was in an excellent mood. This meant in 2 more months, about 2 months in reality, he could light up the wood life astrolabe, just like the golden life astrolabe. Once the wood life astrolabe was lit up, his celestial spirit master and martial god levels wouldn't be stuck at the bottleneck. He would reach the peak Star Lord level without any obstacles. Time flew. The Yinling Palace was in chaos. Nearly half of the cities were affected by the chaos of war. Countless forces fought, and corpses were strewn all over the place. The casualties were heavy. Everyone in every city was in danger. Perhaps it would be their turn next time. Most of the forces that attacked the cities didn't want to control the cities or develop them in the long run. They just wanted to plunder. It was a blatant plunder for personal benefits. After all, nobody knew what would happen the next day. Instead of spending a lot of money and time to build a city, it was better to spend the time to earn money. Deal with changes by sticking to the status quo. At least, with enough money in the future, they could make a comeback wherever they went. At this moment, people's greed and selfishness were revealed. In the Yinling Palace, I knew it would be like this. Juan Macho's face turned pale. The file in her hand was crushed into pieces. The battle with the fierce Yinling sect was a tough tug of war. The leaders of the Yinling Palace had always been cautious and didn't dare to start a war easily. They were afraid of the current situation. Only 4 months had passed, but the situation in the Yinling Palace was already in chaos. The Yinling Palace wanted to annihilate the fierce Yinling sect. Even a most ideal outcome would take a year and a half. No one knew what the situation would be like by then. The trap that they had set up back then had completely failed. What should we do next, leader? Juan Mang frowned and asked softly. Juan Macho's face was pale. He was deep in thought. Now, he was in a dilemma. If they didn't have a head-on conflict with the fierce Yinling sect, they might be able to take a step back. However, if the Yinling Palace retreated now, the consequences would be severe. Their reputation would be ruined, and their power in the Yinling Palace would plummet. The worst would be that even their clansmen would lose their confidence. Once the people's confidence was gone, it would be very troublesome. Kill them, leader. Juan Pujuan's eagle eyes were cold. There were 3 great experts in the Yinling Palace: Juan Macho, Juan Mayo, and Juan Pujuan. Now that Juan Mayo was dead, only Juan Pujuan and Juan Macho were left. I don't believe that the fierce Yinling sect has 3 heads and 6 arms. Juan Pujuan's murderous aura was exposed. He had always been the representative of war. Sigh. Juan Macho sighed softly. Kill them? He also wanted to kill them without any scruples. However, the fierce Yinling sect had a strong foundation. If they fought openly, even if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. By then, it would be even more difficult to control the chaotic Yinling Palace. They might even be annihilated. After all, there were many experts living in seclusion in the Yinling Prefecture. There were many hidden experts. Besides, Juan Macho shook his head. The injuries on his body had only recovered to 80%. If he fought with Ji Jin again, his unhealed injuries would be even more serious. There might even be sequelae that would affect his path as a martial artist. The loss outweighed the gain. Although he was the leader, he was also a martial artist. Like all the experts in the Douling world, he wanted to break through the limit and become a saint, Saint King, or even a starry sky expert who surpassed the Saint King level. Perhaps this path was difficult and the probability was negligible, but he never gave up. Leader, Juan Mang said softly. Leader. Juan Pujuan's eyes were extremely cold. Juan Macho's eyes flickered, then he closed them. There was no turning back now. Instead of hesitating, it was better to take a gamble. No matter what, the battle with the fierce Yinling sect was unavoidable. The situation in the Chiyue Palace was even more chaotic now. Because Xing Rumeng had joined the Elder Compound, Qin Jun could not do it alone. Not to mention a year, even 3 to 5 years would be difficult to control the entire Chiyue Palace. Although Xing Rumeng did not have any real power, she was the legitimate leader. As for the fierce Yinling sect, not to mention 3 to 5 years, they could not even wait a year. Whoosh! Juan Macho clenched his fists. His eyes flashed with burning determination. Carry out the original plan. After 1.5 months, attack the fierce Yinling sect. Juan Macho's voice was as steady as a rock. Yes, leader. Juan Mang and Juan Pujuan cupped their hands and left. Second update. Chapter 707. In the land of wood spirits. Faint wood energy lingered in the air. The branches and leaves of the giant trees swayed gently in the wind. This place was peaceful, as if it was isolated from the world. Time passed extremely slowly in this place. After entering this place, Lin Feng had already gone through 12 rounds of cultivation. Each round was 10 days in the outside world. Now, he had already reached the 13th round of cultivation. 2/3 of the time had passed since the 18th round was set to begin. He had already broken through to the Battle God realm in the middle of the 12th round. He had reached the limit of the Star Sea State Battle God realm. He could no longer take another step forward. However, the absorption of the woodlife astrolabe had yet to reach its limit. Therefore, Lin Feng continued to cultivate and wait patiently. Until, whoosh, whoosh, the absorption speed of the woodlife astrolabe slowed down. It was like a person who had eaten his fill. It wasn't easy for him to stuff more food into his stomach. The absorption speed was greatly reduced. However, Lin Feng was overjoyed. It's almost full. Lin Feng was filled with anticipation. He didn't know how long he had been cultivating. However, no matter how patient he was, he couldn't hold on any longer. After all, repeating the same thing every day was very tiring. Now he could finally see the light of day. He was about to light up the wood life astrolabe. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The gold life astrolabe shone brightly. Finally, after absorbing the last trace of wood energy, the gold life astrolabe was completely saturated. It was like a bottle that was filled with water. Not a single drop could be poured in. The faint wood energy surrounded the gold life astrolabe, but it couldn't enter. It formed a mist on the outside. The phoenix in his body lit up and raised its head to cry. At the head of the phoenix, the exquisite phoenix eyes shone brightly. They were filled with extreme radiance, as if they had come to life. The third wood life astrolabe shone brightly. Such dense energy, vigorous and full of life. This is the wood life astrolabe. Just like the fire life astrolabe and the gold life astrolabe, this third light spot seems to have its own consciousness and life. Lin Feng sighed inwardly. The wood life astrolabe and the entire phoenix in his body were changing. That was an advancement, a rebirth of one's body. His mind was immersed in his body as he carefully observed the changes of the wood life astrolabe and the phoenix life astrolabe. However, he did not notice that in the world of the giant tree, his only friend was waving the branches even more violently. His light voice carried the sound of the wind as if he was talking. In an instant, whoosh, a bright emerald green light flashed. The giant tree that had always swayed with the wind suddenly changed. In the air, a branch covered in leaves flew over. Its speed was as fast as a meteor, so fast that it could not be seen at all. This speed was thousands of times faster than Lin Feng's all-out attack. In an instant, it enveloped Lin Feng. What? Lin Feng was shocked, and his expression changed. In an instant, he left his inner vision state and opened his eyes. At this moment, everything in front of him was a sea of green, and his surroundings were filled with a dense aura of wood energy. It was as if he had been isolated from the world. Tree leaves? Lin Feng was startled. The greenery in front of him was the large leaf of the giant tree. He stretched out his hand and touched it. It was the branches and vines of the giant tree that had surrounded him, forming a cocoon-like shape. What's going on? Why did the giant tree trap me? Lin Feng's mind was filled with questions. He was puzzled. It seemed that the giant tree did not have any evil intentions. However, he could not get out. While he was pondering, suddenly, the green light shone brightly, and a sparkling and translucent bead that looked like a water droplet appeared in front of him. It was connected by a small green branch of the giant tree. It was like a human's arm, and he was holding it as if it was a gift. What does this mean? Lin Feng looked at the green crystal in front of him curiously. It contained a great amount of energy and was filled with a strong aura of life. He stretched out his hand and was about to touch the green crystal. However, in an instant, something strange happened. Chi! A piercing sound rang out. Lin Feng opened his eyes wide, and he was completely dumbfounded. He looked at his chest in disbelief. At this moment, blood was dripping down. The thin branch of the giant tree had pierced his chest like a dagger. It was so fast that he did not even feel any pain. Why? Lin Feng was dumbfounded. He could not figure out why the giant tree had attacked him for no reason. Whoosh! The branch suddenly pulled out, causing blood to splatter everywhere. It was like an extremely terrifying weapon that was stained with his blood and absorbed it in an instant. The sharp pain came from his heart. Lin Feng stared at the small green branch in front of him. However, it was different from what he had seen before. Wait. Where did the green crystal go? Lin Feng was dazed. He seemed to have thought of something. It can't be, right? His chest heaved up and down. Clenching his teeth, Lin Feng was instantly immersed in it. Soon, he found the green crystal. However, it was in his wood life stellar plate. What? Lin Feng was shocked. At this moment, the wood life stellar plate had gradually returned to its normal form. It looked like a bright ball of light that had completed its evolution. He could clearly feel the existence of the wood life stellar plate. It was as if a door had been opened in the Phoenix life stellar plate. However, when he opened the door of the wood life stellar plate, what he saw was a tree. Whoosh! Whoosh! The tree kept growing. The speed of growth was not fast, but it was as if there was no limit to it. Lin Feng was completely dumbfounded. The dense aura of wood, the sturdy branches, the shape and characteristics of the tree, and even the patterns on the tree trunk were all similar to the tree he had seen before. Wasn't this the giant tree? It planted its seed in my wood life, Astral. Lin Feng's eyes lit up as he finally understood what was going on. In the wood life stellar plate, nothing could hide from his senses. The green crystal had turned into the root and formed the foundation of this giant tree. The surging vitality seemed to be connected to him. It's my blood. Lin Feng's eyes were shining. He gazed at the wood life stellar plate. The green crystal at the root of the giant tree still had some traces of his blood. In an instant, Lin Feng exited the inner vision state. The faint wood energy lingered around him. His body had already recovered. The giant tree was healing him. However, with the recovery ability of his phoenix blood, this injury was just a small injury. Lin Feng looked at the giant tree with sparkling eyes. He understood a lot in his heart. The giant tree didn't mean any harm. It didn't treat him as its child. Otherwise, it wouldn't have stained its seed with his blood. It was just a process of recognizing him as its master, so he could completely control it. Don't worry, I'll take good care of it. Lin Feng smiled and nodded. However, I want to know why. Lin Feng's eyes flickered with curiosity. Unfortunately, I don't understand you. The more powerful an existence was, the rarer its descendants were. It was the same for the Magi, the ancients, the demonic beasts, and the wood spirits. He raised his head and looked. He couldn't see a second green crystal, nor could he sense a similar aura. Whoosh! A gentle wind blew, and the branches and leaves fluttered. Lin Feng closed his eyes. The wind blowing against him felt like the giant tree was talking to him. It was very comfortable, very light, and very gentle, just like a mother talking to her child. He smiled. Although he couldn't understand it, he could feel it. All parents in the world were the same. The giant tree seed was still growing. Lin Feng entered an endless state of cultivation again. He couldn't waste time. It's been almost 4 months since I entered the wood spirit land. There are still 2 months to the half-year period, that master said. Lin Feng nodded and thought to himself. However, he didn't know that he had made a mistake. The half a year Gigi mentioned was different from the half a year he knew. He forgot that he had been unconscious for a long time because he used the wind escape. My star weight is dozens of levels. My star control is at 9.5 levels, and my strength is at the 12th level of star C. Chapter 708. I wonder what's so special about this purple crystal. Even more curious, Lin Feng picked up the purple crystal and looked at it carefully. Compared to last time, this huge purple crystal was a lot lighter. It wasn't that its weight had decreased, but that during this period of time, his strength had increased again. But even so, this purple crystal was still so heavy, and it took a lot of effort to hold it in his hand. Outside the crystal, the flashing light was no longer there. Without the purple mist surrounding it, and without any illusions, the purple crystal in front of him looked like a real stone. Other than its weight, there was nothing special about it. But in the 4th layer of heaven, indigo gray treasures are all 9 stars. This purple crystal is a purple gray treasure, so it shouldn't be worse than 9 stars. Thinking in his heart, Lin Feng thought to himself. His eyes flashed slightly, and in a split second, he cut his finger, and a drop of blood dripped down. Pata! It fell on the purple crystal, but it seemed to have fallen on a normal stone, and there was no reaction at all. The blood slid down the purple crystal's rugged surface, dripping to the ground. In a split second, Lin Feng was even more curious. It's not a spirit treasure, Lin Feng said. If it was a spirit treasure, it would naturally absorb his blood. Could it be an astral treasure? Lin Feng's eyes brightened. He also had an astral treasure on him, which was that astral treasure staff, but he couldn't recognize it as its master for the time being. Let's give it a try. As soon as he thought of it, Lin Feng's astral power bloomed in a split second. This time, it was completely different from that time with the astral treasure staff. His astral power had greatly changed. Even, he had the power of a constellation. But why? The starlight dimmed. He failed again. No, this is not an astral treasure. Lin Feng shook his head. If it was an astral treasure, even if it couldn't recognize it as its master, at least there would be a reaction, just like the Astral treasure staff. But the purple crystal in his hand didn't have the slightest reaction, as if it was dead. Holding in his hand, Lin Feng frowned slightly. Could it really be just a crystal? Lin Feng raised his head and pursed his lips. Observing the craggy purple crystal carefully, Lin Feng's brows were furrowed, relaxed, and tilted his head. Perhaps, if he hadn't read the illustrated handbook, he would really believe that it was just an ordinary crystal. However, in the illustrated guide to ores, there were even more precious crystals, which were even more precious than the entire Yanling prefecture. However, there were no records of this violet crystal. Why? The reason was simple. There's a 99% chance that it's not a crystal. Lin Feng came to an answer. The Yanling Imperial Mansion would never use a piece of crystal as a violet treasure. Whether it was the indigo grade or blue grade treasures that he had obtained this time, all of them could be used directly by a martial artist. Even the red and orange grade treasures were of a lower grade. There was no reason for this purple treasure to be so different from the other treasures. It's because I'm too inexperienced and can't uncover its secret. Lin Feng understood. Just like the Astral treasure staff that day. If it wasn't for Qian, he probably wouldn't have known its identity until now. The jade was covered in dust. This violet crystal was probably the same. Forget it. Maybe the time isn't right. Lin Feng smiled faintly and stroked the violet crystal. His eyes were filled with regret, but he couldn't think of any other way. Suddenly, Lin Feng was slightly startled. His eyebrows relaxed slightly, and his eyes lit up instantly. Wait, the appearance of this violet treasure is related to the Violet Star Realm, and the Violet Star Realm is related to the ancient godly beast, Thunder Centipede. Then, this violet treasure, could it be? With his eyes sparkling, Lin Feng stared at the craggy surface of the violet crystal. Under his gaze, the craggy surface of the violet crystal seemed to change, just like the golden scales on the godly beast, Thunder Centipede, that he had killed. It was similar. The more he looked at it, the more similar it was. The two objects were different, but they somehow overlapped. Bang! Bang! Lin Feng's eyes widened. His heart raced violently. Yes, it should be so. Thunder Centipede armor. Lin Feng's eyes lit up instantly. Inside his body, the golden fate astrolabe in the Phoenix natal chart shone brightly. A familiar and powerful force instantly enveloped his body. His skin became hard, his limbs became strong, and his body flashed with golden light. It was as if his body was covered with a layer of armor. Lightning gathered, and spikes grew on his back, sharp and ferocious. The most shocking thing was the two horns on his head, which were like lightning. Buzz, 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 lightning flashed. In an instant, boom! His head shook violently. Lin Feng's eyes instantly widened. He felt a similar energy stirring up in the purple crystal. It was like a call, a feeling of connection between them, as if a sleeping spirit had been awakened by him. It was extremely shocking. Suddenly, he couldn't feel the weight of the violet crystal. It was as if it didn't exist at all. Bizarre. Whoosh! Something strange happened in an instant. The purple crystal seemed to have melted. It instantly dissolved and turned into a ball of purple light. It coiled around his right hand like a snake tightly coiling around it. The horn on his head triggered bursts of lightning, which intersected with the light of the violet crystal. The light was dazzling and bright. It was like the blooming of vitality. What a strange feeling. It's like a part of my arm. Moving his arm slightly, Lin Feng couldn't help but close his eyes. An image appeared in front of his eyes. He was holding the Nightmare Demon Spear and dancing quickly. With a serious expression, the Nightmare Demon Spear in his hand seemed to have come alive, and lightning flashed. With a thought, he unleashed one spear art after another. A light breeze blew, and a cold wind rose. Dragon Sun Spear art, Storm Spear art, Nine Dragon Spear art, Nightmare Spear art, Fireworks Spear art, Light and Shadow Spear art. Those were all the spear moves he had learned since he entered the Douling world. One move after another, he performed them continuously. However, the power was completely different. What a profound realm of spear learning. It's one level deeper than when I learned the spear. His mind was completely immersed in it. The comprehension of realms could only be encountered and not sought. Now, although he was watching himself practicing the spear, there was a different feeling. Over and over again, he kept watching. It was like flipping through a book he had read a long time ago and revisiting the old to gain new insights. Slowly, gradually, the figure in front of him became blurred. In his mind, a sword light and a figure appeared, intertwining with each other. The sword light was overwhelming and domineering. However, the power of the spear was even stronger. Bang! The spear intent and sword intent shook violently. What a pity. Lin Feng sighed softly. The sword move was quite good. It was a pity that the martial artist who performed it didn't have enough sword intent. He had barely reached the rudiment realm. Moreover, it was guided into the rudiment realm with the sword move as the core. It wasn't the martial artist's own power. It was the battle between him and Ru Meng. Ru Meng's sword swallows the sun and the moon. The power was indeed very strong. In an instant, in his mind, the appearance of the seventh wooden sculpture appeared. The sword intent and the movements of the wooden sculpture merged together, intertwining and becoming hazy, forming a whole. In an instant, the sword intent became blurred, and the figure became even more strange. The sword suddenly turned into a spear, and the figure changed from Ru Meng to himself. Chi! Purple light bloomed. Thunder roared. The spear, with surging momentum, seemed to split the heavens and earth, overlooking the world. 7 sets of wooden sculptures. Each set of wooden sculptures had the same 7 forms and 7 intents. The 7 intents of each set of wooden sculptures were exactly the same, but the movements of the wooden sculptures were different. The same intents had 7 different forms, as if one move had 7 styles. That was the true perfection. The more moves there were, the more thorough the comprehension. One was his own comprehension. The other was the essence of the moves passed down by the expert who carved the wooden sculptures. Although one could know 100 from one glance, the power was different. Understand now. This is the true power of the wooden sculptures. At this moment, Lin Feng finally understood completely. The intents of the wooden sculptures were indeed powerful, so powerful that they could be easily used together with moves. The expert who created this intent was a super genius who could make any weapon unleash the power of this move. How amazing was that? Although I don't know what kind of weapon was used by the sculptor of this wooden sculpture. However, the 7th wooden carving with the strongest concept, once you learn it, its power will be unparalleled. Lin Feng was extremely amazed. The power of Ru Meng's sword was probably not even at the half-formed intent of the 7th wooden sculpture. It was already so powerful, so one could imagine how powerful the 7th intent was. Comprehension. Lin Feng fell into a deep state of comprehension. This feeling was not very good. Just like comprehending intents, profound spear moves also needed an epiphany, a sudden thought. Sometimes this was also a kind of strange opportunity that could be encountered but not sought. His figure was calm, and Lin Feng stood upright. A breeze blew in front of him, and the Thunder Slaughter armor had already disappeared without a trace, having exhausted its energy. But at this moment, a spear appeared in Lin Feng's hand. It was a purple spear. It was like a spear condensed from purple crystals, unusually transparent and beautiful. Looking carefully, the proportion of the spear body, the shape of the spear tip, including the length, width, thickness, and so on, were all extremely familiar. It was exactly the same as the Nightmare Spear. It should be said that it was exactly the same as the shape in Lin Feng's mind. However, without the lightning, the purple color was a little less lively, and it lacked the feeling of life. In Lin Feng's mind, the figure holding the spear was dancing. The long spear in his hand was bursting with lightning, and the feeling of life was incomparably clear, as if it was a living thing. But now, the purple crystal spear in Lin Feng's hand was lifeless. But at least Lin Feng had a spear. It was a spear condensed from purple crystals, a spear that could perfectly fuse with itself. because it was exactly the same as the nightmare spear. No, compared to the nightmare spear, the material of this purple crystal spear was thousands of times better, and its origin was extremely mysterious. First update, second update, 2000 hours, carat carat. Chapter 709. 1,000 Days. Lin Feng held the spear with one hand like a stone statue. His eyes were closed, and he was completely immersed in the state of comprehension. In these 1,000 days, Lin Feng did not move at all. In his mind, the 7 moves of the spear that shook the 9 heavens kept appearing. Surging, majestic, able to split mountains. Every move was so exquisite and mysterious. Attack, control, defense, dancing, stabbing, spinning all in one go. Just like a set of spear techniques, it had everything. This is the real spear technique. It is not only attacking, but not defending. Lin Feng thought to himself as he continued to comprehend. He was not in a hurry to practice because he did not know if this state of comprehension would disappear because of his changes. If that was the case, wouldn't it be a waste of effort? He would rather take it slow. Anyway, he had plenty of time now. What he wanted was stability and 100% comprehension, not speed. First step, second step, third step, wrist, footsteps, movement, angle, strength. Lin Feng remembered it in his heart and comprehended it. The concept had already entered his heart. The condensation and coordination between the spear technique and concept was gradually becoming more and more perfect in his heart. Haste makes waste. The comprehension of the spear technique was not something that could be achieved overnight. He had to completely comprehend the 7 moves before he could start practicing. That way it would be the real, absolutely safe. Time flew, but the cultivation of a martial artist was like this. It was normal to go into seclusion for 1 or 2 years. It was not uncommon to go into seclusion for 10 or 20 years, or even 100 years just to comprehend one move. However, it was extremely rare to see someone like Lin Feng who maintained the spear pillar form for a full 5 years. 2,000 days. Boom! The purple crystal spear in his hand seemed to come alive. The purple light bloomed. The color of the purple crystal was extremely bright, and the power was surging. Lin Feng finally moved. Like a dragon coming out of the sea, a move was like a thunderbolt. The eyes that had been closed for 2,000 days finally opened. A dazzling light shot out. However, in his eyes, there was nothing else. Other than the spear technique, there was nothing else. Lin Feng was extremely focused. Chi, chi, chi. The spear's shadow was resplendent, and the spear intent was majestic. They were like animals in hibernation, looking for prey as soon as they woke up. This was the case for Lin Feng. Only to comprehend the spear, Lin Feng spent a total of 1,000 days to learn the first style. Lin Feng spent 500 days to master the second style. For the third style, Lin Feng spent 200 days. As for the fourth style, less than 100 days. He was getting more and more skilled. His comprehension became more and more refined and perfect. Lin Feng's comprehension of the 7 moves was exceptionally clear. It was a transformation of the same intent realm. The stage of familiarity and unfamiliarity had passed. Practicing the spear again and again, the might of the amethyst spear in his hands increased again and again. Early on, during the 2,000 days of practicing the spear pile, Lin Feng's concept of the spear had already surpassed what it used to be. And now, boom, chi exploded. The power of the amethyst spear was extremely overbearing. Not only was his spear tyrannical, but his spear moves and spear intent were even more tyrannical. My infusing spear level is as good as one macho's forgetting fist level. If we fight again, he will definitely lose. The power of the spear was even stronger than the fist. The more difficult it was to comprehend, the more powerful it was. This day was the 3,800th day of Lin Feng's comprehension of the spear. His goal had been achieved. Less than 5 months after entering the Douling world, Lin Feng had already surpassed Wan Macho. He was 100% confident in surpassing him. All that was left was to break through himself, surpass his own limits. The fifth style, the sixth style, and the seventh style. The world of the giant tree was still calm and peaceful. This place was like a carefree utopia. Apart from the giant tree and the wood energy, there was nothing here. It was empty. To cultivate here, one must be able to endure the loneliness. On this point, Lin Feng met the requirements. In this world of the giant tree, where the time ratio was 500:1, Lin Feng spent 3 months in reality. The 15th round of 5,000 days was about to end. In fact, as early as the 13th round, Lin Feng had already mastered all 7 styles of the 7th wooden carving and even combined them into one. Lin Feng named the 7th move Green Smoke Spear Art, because these 7 sets of wooden carvings came from Green Smoke City and the Green Smoke Secret Realm. However, Lin Feng did not stop cultivating. In the 14th round, Lin Feng perfected and comprehended all 7 concepts of the wooden carving. He had completely repaired the originally broken spear moves and had truly grasped all 7 concepts. And in the 15th round, boom! Thunder rumbled. The entire world of the giant tree seemed to be trembling. Space seemed to be torn apart. Lin Feng's power was so fierce that it was unimaginable. One man and one spear standing straight. Domineering and awe-inspiring. That purple light seemed to have pierced a hole in the sky. It was the real creation of heaven and earth. Finally, I succeeded. This is the 8th spear. The corners of Lin Feng's mouth lifted slightly, and a long-lost smile appeared on his face. Yinling Mansion. The arrow was on the bow, ready to be fired at any moment. Yinling Mansion and Fierce Yin School were already incompatible like fire and water. From a small-scale battle, it gradually expanded and affected the entire Yinling Mansion bit by bit. Since the beginning of the conflict between the two forces, more than half of the cities in Yinling Mansion had changed owners, and more than 80% of the cities were affected by the war. It could be said that a slight move in one part would affect the whole situation. The influence was too great. But now, there was no turning back. Even if Yinling Mansion and Fierce Yin School did not want to see such a situation, they could not control it. They could only fight to the end. Yinling Mansion. Patriarch, we have already started the battle according to your instructions. Wan Meng cupped his hands and said, Fierce Yin School is just so. Wan Pujuan's eyes were cold, and the corners of his mouth lifted coldly. He said disdainfully, Other than Ji Jin, there is no one else who can fight. The current sect leader, Ji Russian, is just a good-for-nothing. There is no need to be afraid of him. Patriarch, even if you don't show up, I alone am enough to suppress Fierce Yin School. That's naturally good. Wan Macho's expression was calm. I'm afraid it might not be so smooth. Fierce Yin School has a strong foundation. Pujuan, you must not underestimate them. Wan Meng frowned and said solemnly. Wan Pujuan snorted softly, but he did not take it to heart. With his strength, there was nothing to be afraid of. Let's test Fierce Yin School first and see how many trump cards they have. Wan Macho said slowly, looking coldly into the distance with a murderous aura. The day I come out of seclusion after half a month will be the day Fierce Yin School is destroyed. Her aura was surging, and her shocking aura deeply intimidated Wan Pujuan, causing his heart to tremble. Even if she had not recovered from her injuries, Wan Macho was worthy of being the strongest person in Yinling Mansion. Fierce Yin School. I'll leave this sword to you. Ji Jin's eyes were bright. Ji Xiao took the treasured sword. Even though he had an extraordinary temperament, he still felt deeply intimidated. 5.5 months was a long time for Ji Xiao. In Fierce Yin Treasure Hall, he had received the cruelest and most precious training, and his strength had increased tremendously. Things were different now. Sect Master, this sword is... Ji Xiao raised his head. Feng gave it to me. It's a 9-star treasured sword. Ji Jin smiled. After consuming the healing 8-star celestial fruit, his complexion had recovered a lot, and he was in high spirits. With your current strength, you can already unleash the full power of this sword. Lin Feng, Ji Xiao muttered softly, his eyes burning. During this period of time, he had gritted his teeth and persisted in cultivating. He had even temporarily given up on cultivating the sword Tao. The first reason was for fierce Yin school, and the second was for himself. The fight for the purple treasure in Yinling Mansion made him deeply understand the gap between him and Lin Feng. Holding the treasured sword in his hand, Ji Xiu felt a powerful force. If he had this treasured sword that day, coupled with his current strength, if he fought Lin Feng again, he would definitely not lose. The 1,000 tribes of Yinling Mansion have already begun their probing attacks. Ji Jin's eyes were burning, and his expression was solemn. Wan Macho's injuries have not healed. Now, the strongest person in the 1,000 tribes of Yinling Mansion is Wan Pejuan. However, although he is strong, he is obstinate and opinionated. There's a way to deal with him. The key is you. Ji Xiu's eyes were bright. He looked at Ji Jin and nodded. I understand. Now, he was the strongest sword in fierce Yin school. South of Yinling Mansion, Rockfire City was a small city at the border. It was located in the southernmost part of Yinling Mansion. It was close to mountains, and there were all kinds of volcanoes and magma. It was extremely hot. Further south was a boundless desert. There was no end to it, and it was impossible to tell the direction. This was one of the few cities that had not been affected by the war. This was because this place was too poor. There were few people, and the terrain was not good. Transportation was inconvenient, and there were no merchants. However, because of this, it was lucky to have avoided the chaos in Yinling Mansion. However, luck was not very good. What would come would eventually come. Even if those bandits, even if those evil people who killed without blinking and I did not come, other existences would come. Yinling Mansion was not only inhabited by humans. Thump, thump, thump. The ground seemed to be shaking, and the sky seemed to have turned dark. The surrounding air was chaotic, and many warriors in Rockfire City were shocked. What's going on? What happened? Look, what's that? Oh my God. In the city, both warriors and residents were shocked. Densely packed, earth-shattering giants came crushing over. Some were covered in red scales and stepped on fire dragons. Their bodies were burning with blazing flames. Some had the body of a tiger and the body of a human. They had 3 heads and 3 tails. Shockingly violent wind followed them. There were even some that looked like yellow sacks and were as red as pill fire. They flew in the air like demons. It was the witch tribe, Zhurong witch tribe, Tianwu witch tribe, Dijiang witch tribe, Gomong witch tribe. It was difficult to estimate their numbers, but there were at least tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of them. Boom, boom, clang, clang, clang. Flames and wind were released in an instant, exploding in Rockfire City. The black mass of the witch tribe army spoke the language of the witch tribe and arrived with a loud bang. Cold, killing intent bloomed in their eyes. In front of the witch tribe, humans were like babies who could not walk. Whether it was strength or size, they were inferior. In an instant, a cruel massacre began. Yinling Mansion was in great danger. Second update, third update, 2230 . Chapter 710. Lin Feng's eyes glittered. You're almost at the 9th level. Lin Feng's face was filled with surprise as he suddenly smiled. He had stayed in the world of the giant tree for so long that he had almost forgotten how long he had been cultivating. As for the Phoenix Natal Plate, because he had already activated it, even if he didn't actively cultivate, his astral energy was constantly absorbing and increasing at a very fast speed. The amount of astral power needed to advance from the 8th to the 9th level of the life soul was almost the same as the amount needed to advance from the 9th to the 10th level of the human soul. However, it was almost full at the moment. Maybe a celestial spirit master can break through the bottleneck and become a star lord before a battle god. Lin Feng smiled. His life soul was already strong enough. His original body was cultivating in the world of the giant tree, and his secret clone was also cultivating in the Phoenix realm of the extreme road. Also, his progress was quite good. His fire of rebirth had already reached the 60th level. His life soul was connected to the destined astral plate. The breakthrough of the fire of rebirth had made his life soul meet the requirements to become a Star Lord. The only thing he lacked was the number of stars. The reason why he was mainly a battle god and a celestial spirit master was also because of the number of stars. Strength came with a price. The astral power of an 8th level life soul was comparable to a 9th level human soul. What did that mean? His combat ability would be even stronger. However, at the same time, the path of cultivation would be longer. If a celestial spirit master wanted to become a Star Lord, his life soul would also have to reach the 10th level. The path to reach the 10th level of the life soul was the same as the path to reach the 11th level of a human soul from the 10th level. Of course, the prerequisite was that the human soul had to reach the 11th level. In fact, the original star power of the human soul was already saturated. However, for the life soul, it only had 10% of the same amount of astral power. Whoosh! Starlight shone. The red light in his life soul shone brightly, with a strong feeling of fire. It formed a giant red ball of light that kept spinning. In an instant, it spun faster and faster, and the red light became even brighter. A sudden burst of energy was emitted, and there was a familiar feeling, causing his heart to beat faster. Lin Feng was dazed. As the red ball of light rotated, a faint mist appeared and condensed on the outside of the red ball of light, like a layer of halo. The oval shape slowly condensed into mist. How familiar! Starlink. Lin Feng was shocked. Exactly the same. It was exactly the same as when a human soul reached the 10th star layer. However, his natal spirit was only at the 9th level. The star ring was a medium and a bridge. It was an indispensable existence to communicate and comprehend one's natal constellation. It would only appear when one reached the 10th level of star multiplicity. Lin Feng recalled what his master had said to him that day, but he felt that it was inconceivable. What was going on? In an instant, swoosh! In front of him, a phoenix soared up with a howl. His imposing manner was as majestic as the heavens, causing his heart to tremble. It was the familiar phoenix. The 7 light spots were shining brightly, exactly the same as the 7 light spots on the phoenix natal chart in his body. The natal constellation of a celestial spirit master. Very bright. It's much brighter than Ursa Major. Lin Feng thought to himself, but he wasn't surprised by the appearance of the phoenix constellation. He had already guessed that he would have 2 natal constellations. Now, it was just a confirmation. It's not just the 7 light spots. The other small light spots are densely packed and much clearer. My senses are better. The corner of Lin Feng's mouth curled up. He felt a sense of relief. His talent as a celestial spirit master was indeed much better than his talent as a war god. Just the appearance of the star ring, and the first time he sensed the constellation, it was already like this. When he controlled the astral power and sensed through the star ring, wouldn't his senses be several times stronger? When he saw the Ursa Major constellation that day, he only saw the 7 big light spots. The other small light spots were blurry. In the end, he only saw the blurry structure of the Ursa Major constellation. But now it was completely different, stabilizing the star ring. Although it was a pleasant surprise, Lin Feng was rather calm. He already knew how powerful his talent as a celestial spirit master was. The difference between his talent as a war god was like heaven and earth. Just the star ring alone is already huge. Lin Feng shook his head. He had never even heard of a star ring appearing at the 9th level of the star layer. The 9th level of the star ring actually surpassed the 10th level of the human soul realm. Lin Feng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The density was higher, the color was deeper, and the diameter of the star ring was several times larger. The oval shape of the star ring was extremely large. Just the layers alone were as many as 7. They were very detailed and clear. According to the 3rd level of the star ring, it belonged to the high-end layer. Although it didn't have the faintly flickering light of legends, 7 layers of color was already the limit. Even if it was high-end, it was the best of the best. Most importantly, this is only the 9th level. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled as he sighed. What will the star ring look like when I reach the 10th level? As he thought to himself, Lin Feng smiled bitterly. The more he felt that his talent as a celestial spirit master was outstanding, the more he thought about the lowliness of his war god talent. However, the time needed to reach the 10th level of the Fate Soul realm is probably several times more than the time needed to reach the 10th level of the human soul realm. Lin Feng felt a little helpless. There were always gains and losses. With the star ring and the sensing ability of his Phoenix constellation, reaching the 9th level of star control wasn't a problem. If the human soul could reach it, reaching the Fate Soul would naturally be easy. But there's no need. The 9th level is different from the 10th level. The 9th level of star control is no different from the 9th level of my current star control. Lin Feng pondered. He could already use and control the power of the constellation. He could use it as he wished and control it as he wished. Marrow cleansing is very important to warriors. If I waste this precious opportunity now, it's not worth it. When my Fate Soul reaches the 10th level of the star layer, the star ring will completely transform. At that time, I'll undergo marrow cleansing to reach the best effect. In his heart, it was very clear. Lin Feng didn't get carried away by joy. He was well aware of the steps to become a Star Lord. The first step to reach the Star Lord level was to reach the peak of the Star Sea state, which meant that the body had the ability to withstand it. The second step was to reach the 10th level of star control and the 10th level of the star layer. These were the necessary conditions to reach the Star Lord level. The third step was to transform the 10th level of star control and the 10th level of the star layer. It meant that he was one step away from the Star Lord level. Juan Macho had reached the third step. In fact, the third step was already a success. Reaching the Star Lord level was a matter of course. Rockfire City was destroyed. Not a single human could survive. Under the suppression of the wizard race, all the residents of Rockfire City died without a burial place. How terrifying was the wizard race army of hundreds of thousands. This time, it was the Zhurong wizard race, the Tianmu wizard race, the Dijiang wizard race, the Gomong wizard race, and the Xianming wizard race. The Dijiang wizard race, in particular, was extremely fast and ranked in the top 3 among the wizard race. A massacre. The wizard race's sensing ability was quite strong. That day, Lin Feng released the winged bug with his wings silently. The wizard race could also sense it, let alone the humans. No one could escape from the wizard race's senses. Because of the Dijiang wizard race, even the return talisman couldn't be used. They tried their best to escape, but in front of the Dijiang wizard race, who excelled in speed, it was like showing off in front of Guan Yu. Some residents hid in the cellars and were directly killed by the Gomong wizard race through the ground. Those who hid in the dark were burned to ashes by the Zhurong wizard race. Tragic, extremely tragic. The huge city was burned to ashes and blood flowed like rivers. But who knew? Now, the entire Yinling prefecture was the same. Countless cities were washed with blood. The greed and desire of humans were sometimes equally terrifying. In the Douling world, there were countless prefectures. There were as many as the hairs on a cow. Every day, countless prefectures would rise, and countless prefectures would be destroyed. And these destroyed prefectures were most likely because the wizard race. A catastrophe had already begun. However, no one in the entire Yinling prefecture knew. Even the people of the Yinling race did not know. In fact, as the remaining descendants of the Yinling race, the Yinling race had already forgotten how the Yinling race was destroyed back then. Generation after generation, tens of thousands of years later, people's memories would always slowly fade, let alone how many years had passed. Who still remembered that the glorious Yinling race had erupted in internal strife and fought crazily? That killing intent and the thick smell of blood angered the wizard race. Humans were often like that. Too much peace made them forget who the master of this place was. In the Douling world, of the 3 great human races, the wizard race was the leader, followed by the ancient race, and the human race was the last. other than the 9 great regions and 9 continents, where humans lived and did not have to worry about the wizard race. The other 99% of the land was occupied by the wizard race and the ancient race. The ancients were as indifferent as drifting clouds and wild cranes. On the other hand, the sorcerer tribe was competitive and loved to fight. Now, the humans living in Yinling Prefecture were like guests who had aroused the disgust of the master. They would be expelled. The catastrophe was spreading. It was like a fire that was slowly burning. It was subtle and unknown. In fact, with the existence of the Emperor River Wizard race, almost no human martial artist could escape. At this moment, the war between the Yinling race and Fierce Yin sect had also begun. After the 2 major forces of Yinling Prefecture turned against each other, a real war finally broke out. Declaration of war. The 10,000 tribes of Yinling encircled Fierce Yin School from all directions. Although they did not attack the place where Fierce Yin sect was located, they attacked the various cities controlled by Fierce Yin sect mercilessly. The eyes of the Yinling race martial artists were bloodshot. They wanted to wipe away the humiliation of being massacred in Wanxiang City. But the first wave of attack. It was only the first day. The thousands of Yinling tribe suffered the most painful price, Wanpujuan dead. The person who killed them was the new star of Fierce Yin sect, another genius who had appeared out of nowhere. Jixio. Third update. Chapter 711. Inside the world of the giant tree, Lin Feng was still cultivating. Even if the Yinling mansion was turned upside down, it had nothing to do with him. He had to focus on cultivation. What could he achieve if he slacked off? Once he started cultivating, he had to focus and leave everything else behind. This was the reason why Lin Feng's strength kept improving in the past 6 months. Just like the giant tree seed in the wood life astrolabe, it grew little by little. At this moment, there was only 1 month left in the half-year cultivation period. That was 3 rounds of time in the world of the giant tree. The 16th round. Phew! Lin Feng let out a long breath. His tightly shut eyes flashed with a bright luster. A cluster of flames suddenly appeared in his hands. He was like a wild beast, full of ferocious and violent aura. The flames rose high and radiated light as if they were going to devour everything. The power of the attack was obvious. The devouring fire. Finally, I caught up with the flame of rebirth. Lin Feng smiled. In terms of attack power, the devouring fire was more powerful than the flame of rebirth. However, one was controlled by the human soul, belonging to the martial god, while the other was controlled by the life soul, belonging to the celestial spirit master. The devouring fire had greatly improved in the extreme road phoenix realm. It had broken through to the 60th level. All along, it had been far behind the flame of rebirth. Now, the devouring fire could finally hold its head high. However, compared to the flame of rebirth, there was still a gap. After all, the flame of rebirth was not limited to the 60th level. Most importantly, the flame of rebirth had an inexhaustible supply of energy in battle. This was something that the devouring fire could not compare to. Every 10 levels was a threshold. The 60th level was the limit of the star sea level. If one wanted to climb higher, it would take more than 10 times more time and energy to reach the 50th level of the flame of rebirth when he was at the Star River level. However, it was not necessary. The reason why the flame of rebirth continued to cultivate after reaching the 60th level was to not waste time. However, the devouring fire was different. If the devouring fire wanted to cultivate in the extreme road phoenix realm, it had to be brought by the main body. In other words, the main body could not cultivate in the world of the giant tree. Of course, efficiency had to be considered. The martial god still has the advantage in terms of strength of the human soul. However, with the current devouring fire, its power should be quite terrifying. Lin Feng smiled faintly. During this half a year of cultivation in the world of the giant tree, he had improved tremendously in all aspects. The strength of the war god alone was enough to kill Wan Macho. Not to mention, he still had the fire of devouring and the fire of rebirth. Times have changed. If I fuse the power of each tier 60 and create a magnetic explosion, I'm afraid that even if I had 10 lives, I wouldn't be able to survive. Lin Feng shook his head with a smile. He remembered that even the magnetic explosion had failed to kill Juan Macho because the fire of devouring was too weak. That was why it had been a hindrance. But now, the power of his flames, very strong. His devouring flames had also reached the 60th level. Lin Feng no longer had any worries. He wholeheartedly began to charge towards the 10th level of War God's Star Control Force. The secret doppelganger entered the Phoenix realm of the Extreme Road without wasting any time. His main body, on the other hand, began to comprehend. Huff! Inhale, Lin Feng breathed in and out gently. His breathing was long and even. Quietly sitting cross-legged on the ground, using the Astral Treasure Staff and the Star Ring as a bridge, he quickly entered that wondrous state and saw the existence of the Ursa Major constellation. It was still as majestic and powerful as before, although compared to the Phoenix constellation, its clarity and perception were slightly inferior, but the power of the constellation was truly majestic. Comprehending and possessing the power of the constellation. It was a very long process. Master said that every constellation has 7 main stars. The main stars are the brightest and most resplendent existences. They are the backbone of the natal constellation. Comprehending and absorbing the energy of the constellation, I will choose a main star. Lin Feng pondered. Immersed in the state of cultivation, he could clearly see the Ursa Major constellation through the Astral Treasure Staff and the Star Ring. The 7 shining points of light that formed the backbone of the Ursa Major constellation were the main stars. The 7 main stars are different, but there is no difference. No matter which one it is, they are all sacred and powerful existences. Maintain a sincere heart and comprehend the brightest one. In his mind, what his master said appeared. Lin Feng's heart became very calm. The brightest star he saw was the first one, the main star at the top. It was much brighter than the other stars. This is it. Lin Feng's lips curled up slightly. Comprehending the energy of the constellation, his mind was calm. Strands of energy seeped into his body. Because he had already undergone the body cleansing, his body would not reject the energy of the constellation. In fact, most of the energy of the constellation entered the human soul, like a layer of thin mist gently enveloping the ball of star power. And a small part of it was like water dew, merging into the body bit by bit. It was like slowly accepting a new thing, making him more familiar with the natal constellation. This was a process that could not be rushed. Wild Goose Feather Sect. Fierce in school, you do have some skills. Juan Macho smiled. There were wisps of light in his eyes, but he was calm and did not care at all. Patriarch, Fierce Goose Sect promised great benefits and gathered so many allied forces. Should we also? Juan Meng hesitated, carefully glancing at Juan Macho. It had always been other forces that came to beg the Thousand Goose Feather Tribe. Well, had the Thousand Goose Feather Tribe ever lowered their heads? Unlike Fierce Goose Sect, the Thousand Goose Feather Tribe had ancient traditions and foundations. There were many things that the Thousand Goose Feather Tribe could not do and would not do. Ignore it. Juan Macho's lips curled up slightly. Patriarch. Juan Meng was a little anxious. All right, I know what you want to say. Juan Macho frowned slightly, closed his eyes, and exhaled softly. As the Patriarch, the clan's interests should be the prerequisite. It's not that I can't put down my face, but... Juan Macho opened his eyes and sneered. There's no need for that. Juan Meng was stunned, looking at Juan Macho in confusion. Fierce Goose Sect seems to have the upper hand now, but it has exposed the fact that they are not confident enough. Juan Macho smiled faintly. This so-called allied forces are just a motley crew. They only care about benefits and are fence-sitters. When the wind blows, they will definitely disperse. At first, I thought that Fierce Goose Sect was strong after killing Pajuan, but it was just a flash in the pan. They are now at their wits' end. Juan Macho's eyes were cold and arrogant. He was like a king, with a domineering aura that made one Mang submit willingly. He cupped his hands and said, "Then what should we do next, Patriarch? Gather the troops and prepare for the general attack." Juan Macho's eyes were full of killing intent. 7 days. Only 7 days, and my injuries will be healed, and my strength will return to peak condition. When the time comes, I will wash Fierce Goose Sect with blood. Bang! His aura was firm. Juan Macho clenched his fists tightly. This time, he was full of confidence. Fierce Goose Sect. In the end, I can't hide it from Juan Macho. Ji Jin smiled and shook his head. "Master, it's so urgent now, and you're still smiling." Ji Russian looked worried. The Allied forces are already very uneasy. They should have received the warning from the Wild Goose Sect and will probably kill them without mercy. Now, they are all hesitating. "Ignore them," Ji Jin said indifferently. Ji Jin said calmly, "Those who walk different paths cannot work together. In the beginning, I was just using them to intimidate the 10,000 races of goose feather." Unfortunately, Juan Macho saw through it. Zhu Ling said helplessly, holding his chin. Among the three of them, Zhu Ling's personality was the most similar to Ji Jin's. Since there was no way out, it was useless to be worried. It was better to face it calmly. "Is there really no other way, Master?" Ji Russian frowned. He didn't expect that after taking over Fierce Goose Sect, he would lose his family before he could even warm the seat of the sect master. "We haven't fought for a day, and the outcome is uncertain." Ji Jin's eyes brightened. "Although Ji Xiu is still not a match for Juan Macho, if we gather everyone's strength, we might have chance. At least, we have a 10 to 20% chance of winning." "So little." Ji Russian sighed. "That's good enough. Eldest senior brother," Zhu Ling said casually. Zhu Ling said in a carefree manner, "In any case, the seeds of the Fierce Yin School have already been sown. We can fight without any worries." Ji Jin's eyes brightened. "Fierce Goose Sect is not a place the Wild Goose Sect can step on and need as they wish. Today, even if the sect is annihilated, I will make the Wild Goose Sect pay the most painful price." "Unfortunately, little junior brother is not here," Zhu Ling said regretfully. "Otherwise, with his strength, he would be a great help." "That's right. Half a year ago, little junior brother was able to injure Juan Macho. His strength will definitely increase during this half a year. Even if he can't reach Juan Macho's level, he will still be able to greatly increase the battle prowess of our Fierce Yin School." Ji Russian also expressed his regret. Ji Jin shook his head. "I misjudged Juan Macho's injury." Ji Jin smiled and said indifferently, "It's not necessarily a bad thing. With Feng Er's improvement speed, he may be able to avenge us in the future." Ji Russian and Zhu Ling glanced at each other and nodded. They had always seen Lin Feng's improvement speed. It was indeed shocking. There was no need to die together. The three of them would leave the most valuable seed. Just as their master said, it was not necessarily a bad thing. In the world of the giant tree, day after day passed. Lin Feng kept sensing the main star and cultivating persistently. Traces of constellation power merged with his soul and the original star power, every inch of his skin and every cell in his body. His body was changing, and so was his soul. Before he knew it, Lin Feng was getting closer and closer to the Star Lord level. The 10th gear was the most important. By then, almost half of the 17th round had passed. 5.5 months had passed in the outside world, plus the half-month Lin Feng had been unconscious after using the wind escape. It was exactly half a year that Juan Macho had expected. It was as if it had long been predestined. The track of history was slowly turning. And Lin Feng finally ushered in the final breakthrough to the Star Lord level. The 10th gear. 4th update, more. Chapter 712. Pa, pa, pa. Lin Feng's heart trembled when he sensed the powerful energy. It was the transformation of the original star power deep inside his human soul. The star sphere formed by the star power, the star fog formed by the star power, and the star ring that combined the star power and the star power of the star power and the star power of the constellation. The three forces intertwined with each other, as if three guests were living in a big house. From unfamiliar to familiar, in his human soul, the original star power kept changing. This is the 10th grade star power. Lin Feng was shocked. The change of the star fog was like a layer of armor outside his body. It had a unique spirituality. It was a power that was independent of the body, the existence of the natal constellation. No wonder Wan Macho could block the magnetic explosion at such a close distance. So it's the protection of the natal constellation. Lin Feng thought to himself. At this moment, he finally understood. After a long time of assimilating the constellation power, his body and human soul seemed to have formed a complete whole with the constellation power, using it as a bridge to communicate and change. With a thought, the constellation power could spread throughout his body and form a solid defense. Of course, this power was limited. It was similar to the power of a Star-Lord. As his human soul changed, his body changed. In an instant, boom, his head shook. Suddenly, a chaotic color flashed in front of him. Lin Feng was shocked. He had come to an endless void. Countless bright stars adorned the horizon. They were densely packed like a compass of starlight, and they were innumerable. The most eye-catching thing was the existence of the giant bear, the Ursa Major constellation. Lin Feng was shocked. The scene in front of him was so similar. He had seen the Phoenix constellation that day. In his ears, there seemed to be the roar of the giant bear. It was so powerful that it shook the entire sky. Unparalleled heavenly power. In an instant, the giant bear in front of him was very clear and bright. Lin Feng felt as if he had entered a whole new world when the countless starlight spots appeared before his eyes. The domineering giant bear had already turned into light spots and disappeared, leaving behind 7 sparkling light spots. From the bear's head to the bear's feet, it formed the entire spine of the giant bear. Especially at the bear's head, the light was extremely bright. It was even stronger than the other 6 light spots. Home planet. I comprehended the main star of the Ursa Major constellation. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat, feeling somewhat excited. The appearance of such a scene meant that he was about to grasp and possess the true power of the constellations. He reached 10th gear. The scene was too familiar. He had seen it before, but it was one of the 7 main stars of the Phoenix constellation. Different from the Ursa Major constellation, the 7 main stars of the Phoenix constellation were extremely bright in front of his eyes. Each of the main stars were brighter than the main stars of the Ursa Major constellation. This was the sensitivity of the constellation. It was simply incomparable. But back then, he was unable to possess the power of the Phoenix constellation. It was because the number of stars was not enough. But now, he already possessed sufficient strength. Of course, it was the human spirit, the star power of the Ursa Major constellation. The light spot on the main star was filled with heavenly might. It was an irresistible and powerful force. It was as if that was the only path before him. Star power was constantly being consumed. Lin Feng extended his hand, lightly touching the main star that was close at hand, yet far away. It was as if a door had opened in the depths of his soul, opening a path to the sky. That was power, the power of the heavens, the true power of the stars. Hua! The energy of the main star was completely released. The dazzling light aura illuminated everything, and nothing else could be seen. The star power in the human spirit vanished. At this moment, Lin Feng felt that he had entered the main star and entered a mystical world. It was a completely different feeling. Boom! Lightning gathered. Hua! Lin Feng opened his eyes, which were shining brightly. Around his body, there was an intense lightning gathering, flickering with an exceptionally powerful force. Very similar, extremely similar. So much so that he felt an incomparable sense of familiarity. Lightning slaughter, it's like the power of the lightning slaughter. No, it's like the power of the ancient divine beast lightning slaughter, exactly the same. This is the power of the Ursa Major constellation that I possess. Lightning. ZZ. Lightning was flashing outside his body. In the human spirit, the planet had completely changed. The astral control of the 10th grade had been transformed along with the number of stars. I did it. I finally reached this level. Lin Feng smiled and clenched his fists. Controlling lightning was like Juan Macho controlling wind. He had caught up with Juan Macho on the path of becoming a warrior, and had also reached the final barrier to break through to the Star-Lord level. Fully possessing the power of the constellation meant that he had 1 foot in the Star-Lord level. The power of the constellation wasn't the energy of the origin. It was a kind of constitution, an essential existence like the cells in a human body. It was an essential existence. To a martial artist, it was more like a key. In other words, it was stairs. Thousands of members of the Yenling tribe. Boom! The gate was broken. An indifferent figure slowly flashed out. The intense energy was overwhelming and domineering. It was a man surrounded by brown starlight. His eyes were as bright as stars, and he had a domineering aura that seemed to be looking down on the world. Juan Macho, congratulations on coming out of seclusion. The neat and loud voices were like thunder. In the Goose Feather Fairyland, there was a vast expanse of darkness with no end in sight. All the warriors of the Wild Goose Feather clan knelt down on one knee. Their faces were filled with respect and conviction. Their eyebrows were shining with a bright luster, gathering their confidence and strength. As long as Juan Macho was here, nothing would be a problem. He was their king. Whoosh, whoosh, the wind was blowing. Juan Macho's figure fluttered in the wind. The brown starlight moved his body, flashing with divine power. After half a year, Juan Macho had finally recovered all his strength. Peak strength. Today's battle is for glory. Juan Macho's figure floated in the air, looking down at everyone with sharp eyes. Victory is not an option. His voice was firm, like rolling thunder. The countless martial artists of the Wild Goose Feather clan roared in unison. Their aura had reached the peak. The war had finally begun. The mighty army of the Goose Feather tribe moved out. They all came out. This was a real war, a war that would determine the final ownership of the Goose Feather tribe. All the Star Sea level warriors joined the war. Star River level warriors had no value at all in this level of battle. They were just cannon fodder. The 2 strongest forces of the Goose Feather tribe finally started a head-on battle. Led by Juan Macho, the army was unimpeded all the way to where the Fierce Yen school was. Juan Macho went straight to the point, not needing any tactics at all. In the face of true decisive power, all schemes and tricks were useless. Victory and defeat were decided by strength. The entire Goose Feather tribe was in a state of panic. Wherever the Goose Feather tribe went, all the forces avoided them. No one dared to provoke them. Such power was enough to sweep the entire Goose Feather tribe. Juan Macho used his actions to tell all the restless forces. Those who stood in his way would die. Fierce Yen School. Fight! Ji Jin's eyes were bright. There is no way out. Ji Russian's expression was serious. This battle, if we don't win, we die trying. Zhu Ling clenched his fists. In front of the Fierce Yen Treasure Hall, all the elders, guardians, masters, and elite disciples of the Fierce Yen School were gathered. Every Fierce Yen School disciple's eyes were filled with a bright light, and a strong desire to fight was boiling. This battle would decide the life and death of the Fierce Yen School. Although the unity of the school was not as strong as that of the family, the warriors would not run away. No one was willing to be a coward. Those who had bad intentions and those who were timid had already left. Ji Russian had already informed all the warriors of the Fierce Yen School 7 days ago that those who were unwilling to fight for the school leave. They were not reluctant. Perhaps the Fierce Yen School would lose a lot of power, but what they gained was more unity and stronger determination. The warriors who stayed swore to live and die with the school. Kill those sons of Beatrice Cheese from the Goose Feather tribe. Fight with them. No one in the Fierce Yen School is afraid of death. We swear to protect the school. The roar was accompanied by the boiling desire to fight. Every warrior of the Fierce Yen School who stayed was not afraid of death. They would live and die with the school. This battle was not only about strength, but also about fighting spirit and determination. In a battle of this level, the decisive factor was sometimes these ordinary disciples. In the land of wood spirits, whoosh, a figure flashed. With a faint smile, Lin Feng came out of seclusion. His expression was calm, but his eyes were even brighter. Compared to when he entered, both his temperament and feeling had changed drastically. The current Lin Feng had completely transformed. Although there is still half a month to half a year. But since I completed my goal in advance, I'll return early. Lin Feng smiled faintly and said softly, with the school in his heart, there was no point in continuing to cultivate. The path of the God of War and the path to the Star-Lord level have been completely paved. There are no more difficulties. Lin Feng smiled faintly with confidence. Now, if he wanted to break through to the God of War level, he only needed to break through that thin layer and he would be able to advance. But it was meaningless. Master said that once I break through to the Star-Lord level, I must leave immediately. Otherwise, the wizard race will be alerted. Not only will it bring disaster to the Yinling mansion, but it will also put me in danger. Lin Feng muttered in his heart. He remembered his master's words very clearly. Although he was curious, there was no need to try such a dangerous thing. Master and senior brother must be shocked. Lin Feng smiled faintly. His strength had completely changed compared to half a year ago. Now, he had surpassed his master. The student had surpassed the master. This time I won't lose again. With a faint light in his eyes, Lin Feng was full of confidence. Thinking of the battle with Juan Macho that day, Lin Feng shook his head with a faint smile. Now, it was easy for him to kill Juan Macho. They were both peak star sea states, but their strength, it was completely different. I'm coming, Yinling Mansion. Lin Feng smiled faintly and disappeared in an instant. First update. Chapter 713. The war that would decide the ownership of Yinling Prefecture was about to start. At this moment, the other forces in Yinling Prefecture stopped what they were doing and watched the war that had not happened in 10,000 years. Everyone wanted to know who would win in the end. Swoosh! Light shone. Lin Feng crushed the town return talisman and returned to Wild Goose City. Wild Goose City was the closest city to Wild Goose Sect that was in charge of 15 cities to the south of Yinling Prefecture. There was no town return talisman to return to Wild Goose Sect. Both Wild Goose Sect and Wild Goose Sect would not make such a dangerous star talisman. Just like Wild Goose Sect, the shortest way to enter Wild Goose Fairyland was to return to Wanxiang City before returning to Wild Goose Fairyland. It was the same for Wild Goose Sect. They would return to Wild Goose City before heading to Wild Goose Sect. Lin Feng was surprised. There are so few people. What happened? There were few people on the streets. It was empty. The huge Wild Goose City was actually empty. It looked extremely strange. The last time he came here, it was still crowded. But now, it was as if a disaster was coming. It was very strange. Something must have happened. Lin Feng frowned and looked around. He had a bad feeling. Did something happen to Wild Goose Sect? Lin Feng's eyes were burning. His heart skipped a beat. Lin Feng quickly sensed the aura of the cultivator closest to him, and his eyes lit up. In an instant, he disappeared. Swoosh! A figure flashed. Lin Feng's sudden appearance shocked the middle-aged warrior who was leaving in a panic. Lin Feng's eyes turned cold. He glanced at the warrior's martial attire. He was undoubtedly an outer sect disciple of Wild Goose Sect. Senior brother, why are you leaving? What happened to Wild Goose Sect? The middle-aged warrior was stunned. He said in surprise, Junior brother, you just came back. Yes, Lin Feng nodded. The middle-aged warrior understood and said, don't go back. Wild Goose Sect is attacking. At this moment, I'm afraid Fierce Yin School is already engulfed in the flames of war. As he spoke, the middle-aged martial artist could not help but blush. He was one of the martial artists who had escaped and was unwilling to live and die with Fierce Yin School. The battle has already begun. Lin Feng was stunned. That's right. I heard that the Yinling tribe dispatched an army of 1,000,000. No, an army of 10 million. The middle-aged warrior's eyes revealed a tinge of fear as he sighed. Who would be willing to be a bachelor when there's a woman? However, the Wild Goose Feather Tribe is coming aggressively. Fierce Goose School will lose no matter how they fight. Rather than dying in battle, it's better to drag out an ignoble existence. After all, we only have one life. Don't you think so, junior brother? Junior brother? Where is he? The middle-aged martial artist raised his head in surprise. He looked around, but there was no sign of Lin Feng. Whoosh! Like a sharp arrow piercing through the air. Lin Feng's expression was extremely serious. His eyes shone with a cold light. His speed had completely exploded. He rushed to Fierce Yin School with all his might. How could he dare to delay any longer? If what that person said is true, I'm afraid the land would be littered with corpses by now. Lin Feng clenched his fists tightly. An astonishing aura condensed outside his body. He broke through the wind, and his speed was extremely fast. I didn't expect the Wild Goose Feather Tribe to come so ruthlessly and in such a hurry. Fortunately, he had come out of seclusion early. Otherwise, if he had come a few days later, he would have been powerless. And now there was still a chance. An incense sticks time. I'll be there in an incense sticks time. Master, senior brother, Chan, everyone from Fierce Yin School, wait for me. The distance between Wild Goose City and Fierce Yin School was actually a long way. For an ordinary galaxy-level martial artist, it might take 2 hours. However, for Lin Feng, he only needed an incense sticks time. The battle had indeed begun. The battle that everyone was looking forward to had completely begun outside the mountain gate of Fierce Yin School. Millions of martial artists were in a chaotic battle. Whether it was Fierce Yin School or the Wild Goose Feather Tribe, every martial artist was unafraid of death. They were filled with a thick, murderous aura. This battle was unavoidable. Between the two major forces, only one could survive. When enemies met on a narrow path, the courageous would win. Perhaps the battle at the top of the pyramid was very important. However, these martial artists at the bottom also had decisive factors. Momentum, fighting spirit. The massacre began crazily. In the blink of an eye, blood flowed like a river and corpses were everywhere. The soaring, murderous aura and the piles of corpses caused a bloody storm in the Wild Goose Feather Tribe. Tens of thousands of years of hatred at this moment, in the form of war, in the decisive battle of life and death, completely erupted. No one could stop it. The grudge between the Wild Goose Feather Tribe and Fierce Yin School had reached the time to be resolved. Easterly Foam City, a small city in the south of the Wild Goose Feather Tribe. It was originally a peaceful place where people lived and worked in peace. It was also a place that had not been affected by the chaos of war. However, now boom, clang clang, the power was released wildly. The Zhurong Sorcerer Tribe, Tinwu Sorcerer Tribe, Dijiang Sorcerer Tribe, Gomang Sorcerer Tribe, and Xianming Sorcerer Tribe. The army formed by the 5 major sorcerer tribes washed this simple, small city with blood. Blood splattered all over the city walls. Heart-wrenching screams and cries for help rose and fell one after another. It was a frenzied massacre. The Sorcerer Tribe giants' eyes were blood-red as they killed the humans continuously. They drank their blood and gnawed on their flesh. Like uncivilized barbarians, the Sorcerer Tribe was extremely cruel. To them, these insignificant humans were nothing but prey. The 3 major tribes of the human race? The Sorcerer Tribe never cared about them. In fact, they did not care about the ancient tribe and the human race at all. They sealed the entire city. In the sky, the Dijiang Sorcerer Tribe was the absolute ruler. Even if the Gomang Sorcerer Tribe had wings, their combat power was worlds apart from the Dijiang Sorcerer Tribe. It was easy for a Dijiang Sorcerer Tribe member of the same level to kill 10 Gomang Sorcerer Tribe members. A loud sound boomed in the sky. It was a Dijiang Sorcerer Tribe member who was slightly more than 10 meters tall. He looked completely different from the other Dijiang Sorcerer Tribe members. He spoke the Sorcerer Tribe's language, and the other Sorcerer Tribe members listened quietly. He was like a king, filled with a domineering aura. The Sorcerer Tribe was not a beast. Every Sorcerer Tribe member had intelligence. In fact, they were no different from humans. It was just that their bloodline was nobler than humans, and their strength was stronger than humans. Hundreds of thousands of Sorcerer Tribe members obeyed the orders of this Dejiang Sorcerer Tribe member who was slightly more than 10 meters tall. It was obvious that he was the king of this Sorcerer Tribe army. In fact, even though the Sorcerer Tribe had hundreds of thousands of troops, there were not many who were more than 10 meters tall. There were only a few, and the strongest among them was this Dejiang Sorcerer Tribe. Following the Dejiang Sorcerer Tribe member's orders, he glided away. In an instant, hundreds of thousands of Sorcerer Tribe members roared angrily. Then, they followed and obeyed. The huge ether foam city was empty in the blink of an eye. Everything that had happened just now was like a dream. It was unbelievable. The ground was a mess. The smell of blood filled the air, and corpses were everywhere. There were broken limbs and remains everywhere. It was extremely horrifying. But, however, there were still some who managed to escape the calamity. They sat on the ground in a daze or floated in the air. The remaining people widened their eyes, still lost in the clouds. They couldn't believe that they had survived. The war at Fierce Yin's sect had reached its climax. At that moment, Lin Feng was using all his strength to get closer. Although it only needed the time for an incense stick to burn, at that moment it was longer than a day and night. Every second, Lin Feng's heart seemed to be bleeding. The scene of a massacre appeared in his mind, and he felt his heart ache to the extreme. Every moment, countless people from Fierce Yin's sect were killed. How could he bear it? But what could he do? He could only grit his teeth. Lin Feng's eyes were filled with killing intent. He would definitely not let the thousands of Yinling tribe off. However, no one knew that an even greater catastrophe, a terrifying disaster, was about to descend. When the thousands of Yinling tribe and Fierce Yin sect were still killing each other and waging war for their own interests, the ruler of mankind, the brutal and bloodthirsty Sorcerer Tribe army, was rushing over like a meteor shower, heading straight for Fierce Yin's sect. It was a true disaster. No one knew. At that moment, the thousands of Yinling tribe and Fierce Yin's sect only had killing in their eyes. This intense war would not end in a short period of time. One was fighting for dignity and glory, while the other was fighting for protection and freedom. The thousands of Yinling tribe and Fierce Yin sect fought with all their strength. So did the disciples of their tribe, and so did the warriors who stood at the top of the pyramid. The protectors of Fierce Yin's sect, the sect master, and the elite disciples all moved out to kill the experts of the thousands of Yinling tribe. And at that moment, the battle between the top two forces was also in full swing. Wan Macho fought against the 10 experts of Fierce Yin's sect alone, standing proudly like a king. Ji Rushan, Ji Xiao, the third elder, Protector Long, sect master Qing. These were the most powerful existences of Fierce Yin's sect, each of them exceeding the 10th level of Star Sea State. The 10 of them fought together to kill Wan Macho, but they were no match at all. A faint wind followed, and brown starlight shone. Wan Macho floated in the air, looking down at everyone like a king. The surroundings were bloody, and it was extremely horrifying. Among the 10 experts, 3 of them had been killed by Wan Macho. 4 of them were seriously injured, bleeding profusely. They were on the verge of death. Only Ji Rushan, Ji Xiao, and the third elder were left. They were barely standing, but their injuries were not light. Among the 3, only Ji Xiao still had the strength to fight, but there was no sharpness in his eyes. It was as if the sword in his heart had been broken, and he had lost all his sharpness. Ji Rushan and the third elder covered their wounds with their hands, and their faces were extremely pale. They looked at Wan Macho with deep shock. Too strong. He was terrifyingly strong. This was the strength of the strongest in Yinling Prefecture. Before, they thought that Lin Feng could hurt Wan Macho, and maybe they could find a chance to survive with their advantage in numbers. But now it seemed that it was completely wishful thinking. Wan Macho was even unharmed. Is this the sword that killed Pajuan? It's just SOSO. Wan Macho played with the sword in his hand, looked at Ji Xiao, and casually threw the sword to Ji Xiao. This was not charity, nor was it pity, but a kind of humiliation. Jishio's face was extremely ugly, and his body trembled slightly. Third Elder, Sect Leader Ji? Juan Macho looked at Ji Russian and the Third Elder with a faint smile. This is all you have. Ji Russian and the Third Elder's pale faces turned even uglier. They could be insulted by anyone, but what could they do? The weak were prey to the strong. This had been the case since ancient times. Haha. Juan Macho smiled faintly, but his laughter was filled with contempt and disdain. He looked at the crowd and said coldly, "You have disappointed me. I thought you had some trump cards, but it turns out that you have gathered a group of mobs. How childish. Is there no one in the Big Lian school who can fight?" Juan Macho's voice was extremely arrogant. Ji Xiao, Ji Russian, and the Third Elder's faces turned pale. The corner of Juan Macho's mouth also curved into a cold smile. Suddenly, "Who said there is no one?" A deep voice sounded in the distance. This caused everyone's faces to be filled with shock. Second update. Next update 000. Chapter 714. What a familiar voice. Ji Russian and Ji Xiao were startled, and a figure appeared in their minds. Even Zhu Ling, who was lying on the ground, opened his eyes in a daze, his chest rising and falling faster. He had heard this voice countless times. In Yinling Royal Mansion, the figure who had saved his life twice flashed in his mind. Junior brother was finally here. Zhu Ling smiled weakly, and his heart seemed to calm down. He closed his eyes slightly. Inexplicably, his heart calmed down, and his confidence rose. "It's you." Juan Macho's eyes flashed coldly. Looking at the familiar figure not far away, he felt uneasy, very uneasy, but he didn't know why. "Yes, it's me." Lin Feng looked calm. He glanced around, and a slight anger flashed in his heart, but he suppressed it. 3 dead, 4 seriously injured. Among the 7, he was most familiar with second senior brother Zhu Ling. As for the other 6, although they were senior brothers and seniors of Lian School, he wasn't familiar with them. Fortunately, at least second senior brother was still alive. "I was wondering who it was." "So it's you, the loser." Juan Macho's eyes flashed. She glanced at Ji Russian and the other 2 from the corner of her eyes and felt an inexplicable fear. "What? You didn't lose 10-1 just now, so you think you can win 4-1 now?" Ji Russian laughed. "You're the most powerful person in Yinling Royal Mansion, but you're trying to goad us? Are you afraid of my junior brother?" Juan Macho snorted. "What a joke. I'm not afraid of you small fries." Bang! Juan Macho's arrogance exploded. His eyes were clear and domineering, but he suppressed the inexplicable uneasiness in his heart. "Come on, don't just talk." His domineering aura made Ji Russian and the other 2's expressions change. Thinking of Juan Macho's strength just now, they felt fear in their hearts. "However, I alone am enough to deal with you," Lin Feng said indifferently. His voice was very calm, but it was like a heavy bomb, shocking everyone. "Junior brother." Lin Feng, Ji Russian, and the Third Elder shouted anxiously, while Ji Xiao looked at Lin Feng with bright eyes. Juan Macho was taken aback. Instantly, he burst into laughter. "What a boastful tone. You were just lucky to survive last time. I'd like to know where you get your confidence from." Juan Macho sneered. "Don't tell me you've lost your memory?" The corners of Lin Feng's mouth twitched slightly, but he didn't say anything. There was a flash of light in his hand. Wah! Whoosh! 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 In an instant, 4 celestial fruits appeared in his hand. They shone with a resplendent luster and a shocking aura of energy. Everyone's eyes immediately lit up. A 7-star healing immortal fruit? Juan Macho's eyes turned cold. He was shocked. He immediately glanced at the 4 severely injured men from Fierce Yin School and understood Lin Feng's intention. Boom! Starlight shone brightly, and a strong wind blew. "You want to save them? Dream on." Juan Macho's face revealed a hint of malevolence. The strong power of wind whistled, and a faint light flashed around her body. The power of the constellation immediately condensed, but in an instant, bang! The two energies collided. Sparks flew everywhere. They were evenly matched. What? Well, Macho's eyes widened. At this moment, Lin Feng's body was also flashing with a faint light. Lightning condensed in his hands, and like a lightning snake, it wrapped around his body as though it had a life of its own. That was the power of the constellation. No way. Ji Rushen, Ji Xiao, and the third elder were dumbfounded. They stared at Lin Feng dumbfoundedly, as though they were looking at a monster. Lin Feng had reached the third stage of the peak StarCraft state. It had only been half a year. Don't worry. Looking at Wan Macho, Lin Feng smiled faintly. Then, he handed the 4 celestial fruits to Ji Rushen. Lin Feng nodded lightly. Sorry to trouble you. First senior brother. The 4 men were severely injured, and they had to be treated as soon as possible. Otherwise, there might be repercussions. Oh. Ji Rushen came back to his senses. He took the celestial fruits carefully and ran toward the 4 severely injured men. At this moment, Wan Macho's face had turned extremely ugly. He didn't expect Lin Feng to become so strong in just half a year. His martial artist realm was almost the same as his. Looking around with fear, Wan Macho felt a deep sense of threat. One Lin Feng was already difficult to deal with, let alone the other fierce Yin sect experts. The situation had become extremely troublesome. Only get rid of them first. Wan Macho suddenly had this thought. This was not the time for that. Leader Wan, as I said, I'm your only opponent. Lin Feng's eyes were bright, looking straight into Wan Macho's eyes. How could he not know what Wan Macho was thinking? Does Fierce Yin sect know how to follow the rules? Wan Macho smiled disdainfully. Fierce Yin sect was indeed in the wrong to fight 10 against 1. However, this was a war after all, and it concerned the survival of 2 major forces. Of course, he wouldn't care so much. One-on-one, Lin Feng's voice was firm and firm. If you win, the whole Fierce Yin sect, including me, is at your disposal. A calm and indifferent voice sounded. Not only was Wan Macho stunned, but Ji Rushen, the third elder, and Ji Xiao were also stunned. At this moment, Ji Rushen had already fed the 4 celestial fruits to them. Lin Feng, you're crazy, the third elder said angrily. Ji Rushen and Ji Xiao also frowned. Trust me, eldest senior brother. Lin Feng looked at Ji Rushen, his eyes bright. Junior brother, are you confident? Ji Rushen asked in a low voice. Lin Feng smiled and nodded. Their eyes met, and there was a short moment of silence. Ji Rushen suddenly smiled. Okay, as you wish. Leader. The third elder was speechless, and Ji Xiao frowned. No need to say more. Ji Rushen raised his hand and said indifferently, Fierce Yin sect has suffered such a disaster, and as the leader, I feel guilty. I should abdicate. From now on, junior martial brother Lin Feng, the third successor to the position of sect master, will be the new sect master. Good, very good. Wan Macho smiled valiantly. If I lose, the Wild Yin tribe will immediately retreat and will not invade Fierce Yin sect for 10,000 years. Wan Macho raised his head, still confident. Lin Feng shook his head. I want you to promise me one more thing. Lin Feng, your request is too high. Wan Macho frowned and snorted unhappily. Say it. Lin Feng smiled indifferently. I'll tell you after the fight. In an instant, bang, his aura was firm. Dense lightning surrounded his body. The shocking power of the constellation filled the air, and Lin Feng's eyes flashed with bright light. That's more like a man. Wan Macho's eyes were full of fighting spirit. He glanced at the people of Fierce Yin sect with a hint of disdain. In his opinion, a battle between martial artists should be like this. One-on-one, fair duel. 2 violent auras condensed the power of the constellation, instantly forming a violent intersection of energy. Ji Rushen, the third elder, and Ji Xiao hurriedly moved the 4 severely injured people aside for fear of being affected by the aftershocks of the battle. After all, the 4 of them were already seriously injured, and they could not afford any more accidents. Otherwise, even the gods could not save them. After half a year, the battle, however, compared to half a year ago, it was completely different. The current Lin Feng was no longer the small fry that one macho could bully. Instead, he was standing on the same level. 10th gear. 10th gear. Bang. Bang. The power of the stars shone brightly. The two of them stood facing each other, and the wind and thunder intertwined. The momentum was astonishing. This was the real power of the constellation, which represented the key to entering this Star Lord level. Deep fear. Juan Macho's eyes were shining with a cold light. The uneasiness in his heart grew stronger and stronger. Looking at the little guy in front of him who had been defeated by him, calm and confident, Juan Macho felt inexplicably nervous. He slowly raised his fists, and the wind followed. There seemed to be a goshawk howling on his forehead. Apprehension. Boom! Juan Macho punched out. Hidden in the air, the light was dazzling. G. Russian and the others widened their eyes and held their breaths. Juan Macho's move condensed the power of the 10th gear constellation, the control of the wind, and the realm of the Oblivion Fist. They could not break it at all and were completely restrained. In fact, Lin Feng could not break it that day either. But today, bang, a ball of blazing flame rose in his hand. It was demonic and ferocious, as if it had the power to devour everything. Lin Feng's hand shone with starlight. The flame mixed with the lightning. Lin Feng also punched out. Bang! The two huge forces collided. In an instant, both of them were forced to retreat. It was a probing attack. They were neck and neck. What a terrifying power. Juan Macho was extremely shocked. Lin Feng's physical strength was too amazing. In an instant, whoosh! The moment Lin Feng landed, he had already dashed out like a cheetah. Unlike Juan Macho, Lin Feng was not affected at all. The flames in his hands suddenly exploded. The strong, devouring fire flashed with lightning and intertwined with the power of the stars. His eyes were shining. The wind vortex under his feet condensed light, and his speed was extremely fast. Juan Macho frowned and suddenly shouted. His fists carried the wind and rushed forward. Bang! Another fierce collision. But this time, Lin Feng shouted, and the devouring fire in his hands surged out. It was violent and shocking. It was released crazily, and the explosive power was extremely shocking. Bang! Bang! Boom! Juan Macho was forced to retreat. His chest heaved, and he was instantly at a disadvantage. The terrifying flame seemed to be burning in his body. Lin Feng's fist realm was not high, but his strength and speed, especially the combination of the flame and the lightning, were extremely powerful. Juan Macho was forced to retreat in an instant. His face was pale, and he staggered a little. This created a flaw for Lin Feng to attack. Perching would mirror. The protective Dharma treasure instantly lit up. Juan Macho's body was surrounded by golden light, as if he was wearing armor. Brown starlight surrounded him. Juan Macho's face was distorted. He wanted to take Lin Feng's next punch head-on to minimize the damage. But Lin Feng did not chase after him. What? Juan Macho looked at Lin Feng, who was standing not far away, in horror. Not only Juan Macho, but G. Russian, the third elder, and Ji Xiu were also stunned, their mouths wide open. Although they did not understand why Lin Feng did not chase after him. Lin Feng's powerful strength completely suppressed Juan Macho, which shocked them even more. Did I see it wrong? Is this really Lin Feng? Third update. Chapter 715. He was very satisfied. Lin Feng was quite satisfied with his current strength. Maybe his potential as a god of war wasn't high, but he had proven that he wasn't weaker than anyone at the same level. In fact, he was much stronger. Swoosh! Purple light shone. A purple spear appeared in Lin Feng's hand. It was exquisite and translucent, as if it was made of purple crystals. It was shiny and beautiful. Juan Macho's face turned pale. At this moment, he finally remembered that Lin Feng. He used a spear? Damn it! Juan Macho clenched his fists. Blue veins popped out. He felt that he was being looked down upon. A heavenly state warrior could suppress him without using his best weapon. What did that mean? It meant that Yi Futian's strength was completely above his. No, it can't be like this. Juan Macho gritted his teeth and shouted. Brown starlight shone, accompanied by wind, and the intense power of the constellation exploded around him. That was Juan Macho's pride. He was the most powerful person in the Yanling mansion. His energy was extremely powerful and shocking. The power of the constellation spread out. On that day, not only did he resist Lin Feng's magnetic explosion, but he also defeated Ji Jin. Not far away, Ji Russian, Ji Xiao, the Third Elder, and Zhu Ling, who had just woken up after eating the 7-star immortal fruit, all felt chills down their spines. Such power was truly at the peak of the Starseed state, an expert closest to the Star-Lord state. But Lin Feng didn't move. He looked calm as if he didn't hear anything. Facing Juan Macho's full strength, Lin Feng was still as calm as ever. He wasn't pretending or doing on purpose. Even Lin Feng was surprised by his calmness. Is it because my current strength has far surpassed his? Lin Feng smiled faintly, gently caressing the purple crystal spear. He closed his eyes, feeling a sense of tranquility. The purple crystal spear seemed to have a life of its own. It had a heartbeat and was connected to him. It was a connection that was closer and more intimate than the nightmare spear. In the world of the giant tree, he kept practicing his spear, but he had never used it in a battle. Today was the first time. Swoosh! Lin Feng opened his eyes, and they shone brightly. Clang! The amethyst spear was pointed at Juan Macho from afar. With a sonorous sound, it emitted a domineering aura. Spear intent surged out. It was a kind of aura. It was a kind of pressure. It was an extremely powerful spear initiation realm. Lin Feng was no longer inferior to Juan Macho in any aspect. Juan Macho roared furiously. Bang! His star power bloomed crazily, and he exerted all his strength. The meridians in his left arm lit up instantly, and even his body started to glow rapidly. Dual aperture acupoints erupted. Juan Macho instantly increased her strength to the maximum. Her completely transformed body emitted a thick source of power. Juan Macho rushed forward to attack. An astonishing battle intent filled the air. But boom! The constellation powers collided. The lightning was mixed with the wind, causing the surrounding airflow to become chaotic. They were both at 10th grade and peak cosmic sea state level 3. No one had the upper hand. Lin Feng moved. Thick black fog bloomed, and the wind vortex gathered power. He held the spear in his left hand, but he didn't use the acupoint eruption. His figure didn't even change at all. He just condensed the chi of heaven and earth, driven by his earth energy, and condensed the star power. Faint lightning surrounded Lin Feng's body. The combination of the star power and earth energy released extraordinary energy. Emperor Shun's earth energy, 10th grade. In an instant, white light appeared, and the red light was even brighter. The power of earth energy condensed with strong lightning. In an instant, the flame in his right hand bloomed, devouring fire. Boom! Thunder rumbled. The amethyst spear seemed to be howling. At this moment, it seemed to have a strong vitality. The thick purple light covered the sky and the earth, completely suppressing Juan Macho's momentum. His figure was like a painting. At this moment, the spear initiation realm was perfectly combined with the spear move. In Lin Feng's mind, a figure appeared, holding a spear with one hand, waving the spear in a green world. Behind him, there was that incomparably huge tree. His aura was condensed to the extreme. Lin Feng's eyes instantly shone, and the spear intent was fully revealed. Green smoke spear art. Lin Feng shouted in a deep voice. Wood carving, 7th spear. Boom! An earth-shattering roar. The collision of the two energies was definitely the most powerful intersection of forces in the entire Yanling mansion. 2/3 stage star sea-level peak martial artists were fighting head-on, meeting on a narrow path. Whoosh! Whoosh! The wind blew, and the thunder rumbled. The constellation energy condensed a faint barrier around, making people unable to get close. It was like a forbidden area, the domain of the strong, the battlefield of the peak. Ji Rushan, Ji Xiao, the third elder, Zhu Ling, and the others all widened their eyes and held their breaths. Lin Feng's spear, just now, was deeply imprinted in their minds, and they couldn't forget it. One astonishingly powerful spear. What a terrifying power. How strong was Lin Feng now? No one knew, except for Lin Feng himself. The smoke and dust gradually dissipated, and the battlefield became clear. Everyone's eyes became brighter and brighter. When they saw the scene, bright smiles bloomed on their faces, and they were extremely excited and happy. Juan Macho was defeated. He lay on the ground, his eyes empty. The right side of his chest was badly mutilated, and blood kept oozing out. His right arm couldn't move at all. Lin Feng's spear, just one spear, made his right side almost lose consciousness. Too strong. Although the injury was serious, it wasn't as serious as Juan Macho's heart. His heart, his self-esteem, had been completely destroyed by Lin Feng at this moment. The ant that he could crush easily, the little guy who couldn't hurt him even after using all his strength, now made him taste the most painful defeat in history, the most humiliating battle. He, Juan Macho, was defeated in one move. He couldn't fight back at all. Lin Feng's strength was completely above his. You lost. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled. Looking at Juan Macho lying on the ground, Lin Feng's expression was calm. Back in the world of the giant tree, he already knew that his current strength was enough to crush Juan Macho. Winning was inevitable. Even for him, this was just a warm-up. It was indeed a warm-up. Now, Juan Macho couldn't raise his fighting spirit at all. The gap between them was too big. Lying on his back on the ground, Juan Macho murmured with a blank expression, "Kill me." Juan Macho closed his eyes. His heart was already dead. Kill him. The third elder roared. Ji Rushan, Ji Xiao, and Zhu Ling looked at Lin Feng without saying anything. Especially Ji Rushan, whose wise eyes were shining. But he gave the position of the sect leader to Lin Feng. He knew in his heart that Lin Feng must be up to something. If he wanted to kill Juan Macho, why would Lin Feng wait until now? With his current strength, killing Juan Macho was just a matter of a blink of an eye. Why'd he bet with Juan Macho one-on-one? There must be a reason. You're the strongest person in Yanling Mansion. Can't you afford to lose? Lin Feng said indifferently. He stood indifferently in front of Juan Macho, looking down at the former giant, who he looked up to but couldn't see. But now he was just beside his feet. Juan Macho opened his eyes and laughed self-mockingly. The winner is the king. You can kill me or torture me as you wish. If Juan Macho frowned, I'm not a man. With a cold snort, Juan Macho looked at Lin Feng and said in a cold voice, "But if you want me to betray my family, don't dream about it." After saying that, Juan Macho closed his eyes and faced death calmly. Losing was tantamount to death for him. But in an instant, "Open your mouth," Lin Feng said. Juan Macho was slightly taken aback. Before he could react, he had already tasted something sweet in his mouth. In an instant, after swallowing that sweet taste, a powerful vitality energy spread all over his body, and his injuries began to recover rapidly in an instant. Juan Macho widened his eyes and looked at Lin Feng in surprise. He clenched his fists and felt his strength slowly recover. It was incomparably shocking. It was more than shocking to Juan Macho. Ji Rushan, Zhu Ling, Ji Xiao, and the third elder all stared at Lin Feng with their eyes wide open. They didn't know what Lin Feng was up to. "Say Juan Macho." Lin Feng, the third elder, shouted angrily, but his mouth was covered by Ji Rushan's big hand. Among them, the ones who trusted Lin Feng the most were undoubtedly Ji Rushan and Zhu Ling. They knew their junior brother very well. Lin Feng would never do anything unnecessary. Juan Macho stared at Lin Feng. His face kept changing, and it was very ugly. Juan Macho's strength had recovered by more than half in an instant. How could he not know that what Lin Feng had just fed him must be an 8-star immortal fruit of the healing type? Only an 8-star immortal fruit could have such power. "Patriarch Juan, have you forgotten that you've promised me something?" Lin Feng smiled faintly. Juan Macho gritted his teeth and snorted with a deep look in his eyes. A real man keeps his word. Just tell me what you want me to do. However, I, Juan Macho, will never do anything that harms the interests of the Yinling tribe. Of course not, Lin Feng said with a faint smile. Although they were on opposite sides, Lin Feng also admired Juan Macho. At least he was a real man. Juan Macho snorted and raised his head proudly. He had his principles and bottom line. He would not be manipulated or threatened by Lin Feng. With a faint smile, Lin Feng turned around and looked at Ji Russian and the others. He nodded slightly and said, "Eldest senior brother, second senior brother, Ji Xiao, third elder, come here. There's something I have to tell you. It's related to the survival of the Yinling mansion." Everyone was stunned. Even Juan Macho's expression changed slightly. He looked at Lin Feng in confusion. In an instant, everyone gathered around. The third elder was still glaring at Juan Macho, but Ji Russian and Zhu Ling looked much more serious. They stared at Lin Feng with a vague sense of foreboding. Lin Feng took a deep breath and glanced at the crowd. Finally, his eyes fell on Juan Macho. "There's something I have to tell you." Lin Feng's voice was serious, but his expression was very serious. "The Sorcerer Tribe's army is coming." His voice was calm, but everyone's eyes widened and they were stunned, including Juan Macho. Part 1, Part 2, 1730. Chapter 716. "What did you say, Lin Feng?" Third elder was stunned. "Are you serious?" Ji Russian's expression was solemn. Juan Macho stared fixedly at Lin Feng, his body trembling slightly. Others might not know, but he was the clan leader of the Thousand Wild Goose tribe. In the ancestral records, it was clearly recorded how terrifying the Witch Tribe army was. Back then, the prosperous Wild Goose tribe was brutally massacred by the Witch Tribe. It swept through the entire Wild Goose tribe and left no survivors. More than 99% of the humans were killed. Less than 1 in 10,000 survived. Of course, I wouldn't joke about such things. Lin Feng looked at Juan Macho with a burning gaze. "The Witch Tribe army will arrive in about 15 minutes. With a solemn expression, Lin Feng's voice was firm. Ji Russian, Zhu Ling, Ji Xiao, and third elder's hearts raced. "You saw it with your own eyes?" Juan Macho's voice was hoarse. "Yes." Lin Feng nodded and looked at everyone. He said seriously, "It's like this. After I came out of seclusion and returned to Wild Goose City, I rushed over immediately when I heard that a war broke out in Fierce Goose Sect. Little did I know that at that moment, all of a sudden," Lin Feng's eyes burned as he described vividly. The scenes from earlier appeared in his mind. While he was on his way to Fierce Goose Sect, his chest suddenly pounded violently. It was a warning from the Witch Tribe's heart. After that, I rushed over at full speed. Fortunately, the strength of the Witch Tribe army is different, and their speed is not too fast. Even so, in about 15 minutes, they will arrive as well." Lin Feng's expression was grave as he looked at the crowd with bright eyes. This matter concerned the survival of Wild Goose Tribe. Otherwise, why would he let Juan Macho go? Right now, he could not kill him. Before the first wave was over, another wave came. Ji Russian, Zhu Ling, Ji Xiao, and the third elder looked at each other. Meanwhile, Juan Macho's expression kept changing as she stared at Lin Feng. Her eyes flickered as she said, "So, your condition is that you want our tribe to help you?" "You're not helping me." Lin Feng shook his head and looked straight at Juan Macho. "You're helping Yinling Mansion and yourselves." With a righteous voice, Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly. "Patriarch Juan, you don't think that the 10,000 Goose Feather tribe can stay out of this, do you?" Juan Macho gritted her teeth, but she understood that Lin Feng was telling the truth. Once the army of the shamans appeared, they would not stop the massacre. They would only intensify the massacre. Even if the Wild Feather tribe could escape at this moment, they would have to face it sooner or later. Damn it! Juan Macho clenched his fists, his face extremely pale. It was not easy for the Wild Goose Feather clan to recuperate and develop bit by bit to their current state. Who would have thought that he would encounter such a calamity? "I cannot agree to this condition of yours." Juan Macho looked at Lin Feng with a deep gaze. but I will stay to help fierce Yin's sect and help you resist the army of the shamans. I will die with no regrets. But I can't implicate the entire wild goose feather tribe and die with fierce Yin's sect. Juan Macho, at this time you still. The third elder said angrily, but he was interrupted by Lin Feng. Patriarch Juan, running away is not the way to solve the problem. Juan Macho smiled. Don't tell me you still want to defeat the army of the shamans. Yes. Lin Feng did not hesitate at all. His sonorous voice not only stunned Juan Macho, but also Ji Russian, Zhu Ling, and the others. For a long time, the shamans were an invincible existence in everyone's heart. But Lin Feng was different. Since he entered the Douling world, he had been fighting with the shamans. In the Purple Star Realm, he had even invaded the tribe of the warlocks and slaughtered the shamans. Even if the shamans were stronger than humans at the same level, so what? The shamans were not gods. They were also made of flesh and blood. Why couldn't they defeat them? Ha ha ha. Juan Macho suddenly laughed. What a funny joke. However, Lin Feng's expression did not change. He just looked at Juan Macho indifferently. Juan Macho stopped laughing and looked at Lin Feng. After a long time, he said in a deep voice, How confident are you? Lin Feng stretched out a finger. 10%? Juan Macho frowned. Yes. Lin Feng nodded. If fierce Yin's sect fights against the army of the shamans alone, I only have 10% confidence. Lin Feng looked at Juan Macho with a deep gaze and said seriously, But if Patriarch Juan can help and gather the forces of the Wild Goose Feather Tribe and fierce Yin's sect. Lin Feng smiled and stretched out his other hand. He placed his finger in the middle of his right index finger. 100%. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. I have 100% confidence that I can defeat this army of the shamans. Pang Rant's aura suddenly exploded. Lin Feng's eyes shone brightly, and he was full of confidence. This confidence caused the hearts of Ji Russian, Zhu Ling, and the rest to ripple, and they felt an indescribable sense of security. Juan Macho's expression kept changing. He looked at Lin Feng as if he wanted to know where his confidence came from. There were only two paths in front of him. The other was to retreat with the martial artists of the Wild Goose Feather Tribe and let fierce Yin's sect face the army of the shamans alone. However, as Lin Feng said, he could escape for a while, but he could not escape forever. In the end, the Wild Goose Feather Tribe still had to face the shamans. As for the other path, Juan Macho gritted his teeth and looked very serious. He knew that Lin Feng's 100% confidence was just a metaphor. He was talking about fighting spirit and morale. Even if the experts of the Wild Goose Feather Tribe joined forces, the probability of defeating the army of shamans was less than 10%. However, at least there was a chance. Okay, I believe you. Juan Macho looked at Lin Feng and nodded. After thinking about it, he finally made up his mind. Instead of being chased by the army of the shamans, he would rather fight to the death. Even if there was only a glimmer of hope, he would not admit defeat. How could a martial artist lose before the battle? Thank you, clan leader Juan. Lin Feng smiled and extended his right hand. Smack! When the two hands touched, it meant that both sides had turned hostility into friendship. This was because they had a common enemy. The war stopped. With Juan Macho and Ji Russian leading the way, both sides temporarily stopped the war. Although they were full of anger and had a deep grudge against each other, all the martial artists were shocked when the shocking news was announced. After tens of thousands of years, the army of the shamans was seen again. No way. Is this real? What a joke. The shamans, hundreds of thousands of shamans, all the martial artists were dumbfounded and shocked. Humans have been afraid of the shamans for a long time, and it could not be cured in a short time. Almost every mansion was extremely afraid of the shamans because they did not know when the shamans would come and when the massacre would begin. Ji Russian and Juan Macho kept mobilizing and boosting the morale. This was what a sect leader and a clan leader should do. Lin Feng closed his eyes and calmed down. The battle with Juan Macho was just a warm-up. For him, the real battle had not yet begun. In the army of the shamans, he vaguely sensed many auras that were far stronger than Juan Macho and himself. They were the real, powerful beings. I'm afraid they are Star Lord level shamans. Master once said that the terrifying part of the shamans is that they can condense profound chi. That is when their real power can be exerted. They have physical bodies that are much stronger than humans, and they can control the origin energy much easier than humans. Every single shaman has their own innate abilities that can be displayed. The strength of the shamans will be greatly improved after they condense profound chi, and after they reach the Star Lord level, their strength will be greatly enhanced. Lin Feng thought to himself, but he was not afraid. Maybe he wasn't a Star Lord yet, but he was not inferior at all. He was already half a step into the Star Lord level. Compared to the real Star Lord level, he only needed the baptism of his body and the cultivation of the constellation energy. However, because of the dual cultivation, his body was far beyond the peak of the Star Sea level. Although he had not been baptized, he was even stronger than the newly promoted Star Lord level warriors. As for the cultivation of the constellation energy, maybe it was still lacking. But he also had a trump card that he had not revealed. In the battle with Juan Macho, he did not even use 10% of his strength. He had been waiting for this battle. He would go all out. The wait was very long, especially when they were waiting for this horrifying battle. Every martial artist was uneasy, including G. Russian and Juan Macho. Uneasy, very uneasy, an unprecedented enemy, the murderer who had destroyed the entire Yanling prefecture, the ruler of the human race. The power of the shamans was deeply rooted in people's hearts. Who dared to go against them? But now, the two forces were like moths darting into a flame. They had to do everything they could to survive and to protect the Yanling prefecture. They had no way out. Juan Macho kept looking at Lin Feng, whose eyes were tightly closed, and his expression kept changing. He did not know whether his decision was right or wrong. He had weighed the pros and cons, but more than that, he was influenced by Lin Feng, who had aroused the unwillingness and hatred in his heart. The hatred for the shamans. He was gambling. Although he knew what the result would be if he lost the bet, Juan Macho still had the courage to do so. Maybe because of this decision, he would become a sinner of the Yanling prefecture. But Juan Macho did not regret it, because he was a man, a real martial artist. He would never back down. Thank you, Leader Juan. Lin Feng's voice sounded. Juan Macho was stunned. Lin Feng looked at his former opponent, who was now his comrade, and nodded gently. Although it was difficult to settle the grudges between them, it was rare for Juan Macho to step forward at this critical moment. If it was someone else, they might not be willing to take such a big risk. Don't misunderstand. I'm just willing to accept my loss, Juan Macho said coldly. Lin Feng smiled faintly and was about to speak. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He floated in the air and looked into the distance. At this moment, Juan Macho's expression became extremely ugly. He also floated in the air and looked into the distance. A terrifying aura that could suppress the entire Yanling prefecture. It was about to descend. Second update, third update 2130. Chapter 717. The sorcerer tribe had finally arrived. After tens of thousands of years, they had once again descended on this land. Their goal was to kill, and their pleasure was to destroy. The arrival of hundreds of thousands of sorcerer tribe soldiers had shocked everyone. This was an invincible force. Who could resist them? Both the martial artists of the Wild Goose tribe and the Fierce Goose School were pale. Looking at these giants that were at least 3 or 4 meters tall, and some of them were close to 10 meters tall. Looking at their ferocious faces that looked like both humans and beasts, their hearts were filled with fear. They were so dense that they covered the sky and the earth. The hundreds of thousands of sorcerer tribe soldiers were extremely luxurious. Their leader was a being that resembled a beast, with sharp bone spikes all over his body and a ferocious face. He was 11 meters long. Star Lord level, Dark Sorcerer Tribe. Juan Macho was completely shocked. The Sorcerer Tribe could distinguish their strength by their body shape. 2 to 3 meters was the beginner level, like a baby. 3 to 5 meters was the galaxy level, like a child. 5 to 10 meters was the star sea level, like a teenager. More than 10 meters was the true strength of the sorcerer tribe. When one reached the Star Lord level, their profound chi was stable, their thoughts and wisdom were mature, and they were adults. The terrifying power suppressed everything. No one moved, including Wamacho. They were all deeply shocked by the violent power. The sorcerer tribe was the ruler of the Do-Ling world. They were the strongest of the 3 human tribes. At this moment, boom! Thunder rumbled. A black-clothed figure in the crowd broke the silence like an arrow piercing through the sky. Lin Feng took the lead and flew out. His face was serious and calm, completely different from the other martial artists. There was no fear on his face. Instead, his battle intent was clear. Thick black fog followed him, and the wind vortex became brighter. Lin Feng's speed reached the extreme, and he became a dazzling light shadow that almost no one could see clearly. How can he be so fast? Wamacho was shocked. Lin Feng's speed was twice as fast as when he fought with him. It was the deceleration space. This time, Lin Feng really went all out. Facing the unprecedented challenge, facing the terrifying giants with superior strength, Lin Feng's eyes were burning. He had no way out. The first battle was the most crucial. He wanted to prove to everyone that humans, they were not weaker than the shamans. They could even defeat Cosmic Lord-level sorcerers and Cosmic Ocean-level human warriors. Constellation power. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Lightning flashed all over his body, and dense star power filled the air. The power of the constellation blasted towards the huge, mysterious underworld shaman. Although they were Star Lords, the dark underworld shamans were a race with strong combat power. However, he still had a chance. This was because the sorcerer tribe despised humans. Furthermore, the mysterious underworld sorcerer race's attack power was extremely strong and fast. Its defense was extremely weak. Even the Cosmic Lord Xianming, which race's defense was only equivalent to the peak Cosmic Sea State Gomeng witch race. One chance. Killing him will definitely boost our morale. Lin Feng's eyes were bright and full of expression. The first battle was extraordinary, and he could not afford to be careless. The lightning was completely suppressed. The dark underworld shaman could freely control the power of rain, which was the purest constellation power. Regardless of its quality or quantity, it was far from what he could compare to. However, he had already made plans and was not acting rashly. Boom! Boom! 2 scorching fireballs appeared with a mighty pressure. Crazy power condensed. It was a huge power that covered everything. Since he was using space deceleration, Lin Feng's secret doppelganger was already prepared. The warriors of the Wild Goose tribe and the Fierce Goose sect were all stunned as they stared at the fiery red sky. Wamacho's eyes widened. He recalled the battle between him and Lin Feng half a year ago. He also had the same terrifying fireball power. At that time, he was also caught off guard. No, it was more than 10 times more powerful than the fireball at that time. Impossible. How can he control all the 10th level of star power and condense it together? Wamacho murmured in disbelief. At the 10th level, a warrior could only control about 10% of the star power. Even if the control was strong, 20% was already extremely rare. However, Lin Feng was able to control a full 100% of the power. 2 fireballs, 50% each. Go! Lin Feng's secret doppelganger's eyes lit up as he punched out with both hands. Although a celestial spirit master only had 9 levels of star power, the amount of original star power was comparable to the 10th level of the War God realm. As for controlling a full 100% of the power for him, it was easy. Boom! Boom! The dark underworld wizard was furious. The light of raindrops condensed. Although he was wary of the fireball's power, his power was even more powerful. With the support of the profound origin, a Star-Lord wizard was reborn and was much stronger than a Star Sea Lord. Defense might not be the Dark Underworld wizard's forte, but how could he be afraid of 2 fireballs when he fought offense with offense? The power of the rain collided with the reborn fireball. The The violent power spread to the surroundings and shook violently. The warriors at the edge were all shocked. This power was too terrifying. They had only brushed the edge, and it was already like this. What would happen if they were hit directly? The dark underworld wizard's eyes widened as he shouted angrily. However, he didn't expect that the little guy in front of him would attack him while he was distracted. Now, Lin Feng's eyes were burning. How could the wizard race compare to him in terms of battle awareness? He had been through hundreds of battles. The flaw was the moment when the attack was weak. Emperor Shun's Gang Qi, 10th level. Devouring fire. Lin Feng's eyes were firm, and his expression was extremely focused. Fire and lightning were triggered by the Gang Qi, and they were perfectly combined. The 10th level of Emperor Shun's Gang Qi was like a primer. Although it wasn't strong, it perfectly gathered the star power, constellation power, and origin power. It was like a beast tamer, taming one beast after another to unleash the strongest power. The sound of raindrops was shocking. The constellation power was extremely terrifying. The attack of the dark underworld wizard had also arrived. However, Lin Feng wasn't afraid at all. His body had already turned into an arrow. The purple crystal spear in his hand was shining with a purple light, and it was extremely bright. He and the spear instantly became one. The flying spear move seemed to swallow the entire world. It was like a perfect spear entering realm. Juan Macho's eyes widened, and his heart trembled. All the martial artists looked at the scene in front of them, and their breathing seemed to have stopped. Goose Feather Spear Art. Lin Feng's voice was cold. It was like a voice from hell, like the call of the god of death. The purple spear light attracted the star power and lightning, and the strongest power in the world, increasing the strength of the small figure by thousands of times. The spear moved, and the world shook. It was domineering. Boom! It was a spear that could split the world. Combining the 49 wood carvings, it condensed 7 different intents. This was what Lin Feng had created, the 8th spear. The purple crystal spear was unstoppable. It pierced through the weakest body of the dark underworld wizard, and the devouring fire in his body burned crazily, destroying all his defenses. It might be difficult to kill a wizard with a strong vitality, especially an adult Star-Lord wizard. However, the devouring fire perfectly countered it. Bang! Bang! The flames were ferocious, and the force exploded. The dark underworld wizard's heart-wrenching cry reverberated in the air, full of sadness and unwillingness. It echoed in the sky above Fierce Yin's sect. At this moment, another 2 giant fireballs fell crazily, landing on the dark underworld wizard's body. There was no longer any resistance. Rebirth fire. Boom! The 2 extreme flames completely exploded. It was like lightning striking the earth, like 2 bright stars colliding. In an instant, time seemed to stop. The violent explosion affected the entire wizard army. Thick smoke covered the place, and the angry voices of the wizard army rose from the ground. Everyone was shocked by what they saw. In the air, a young man in black holding a purple spear stood proudly like a god of war. He killed a Star-Lord wizard with 1 spear. The humans' will to fight was completely unleashed. Everyone felt as if their blood was boiling and burning within their bodies. The wizard army, the extremely powerful wizard army, was killed right in front of their eyes. And it was a Star-Lord wizard. 1 strike, instant kill. In their minds, the high and mighty wizard army fell from their pedestal. The fear and depression in their hearts were completely eliminated by Lin Feng's spear. It was replaced by a strong will to fight and unwillingness. Why should they be killed by the wizard army? The wizard army was not invincible. Juan Macho was the most shocked. He felt a little shocked, but he also felt a little angry and unresigned. Lin Feng had hidden his strength in the battle with him. Damn you! Juan Macho cursed in his heart, but he suppressed the anger in his heart because he knew that it was not the time to be calculative. All the warriors of the Wild Goose Army were in high spirits, and their will to fight was aroused. Everyone, listen up. There is nothing to be afraid of in the wizard army. Back then, our ancestors were slaughtered by the wizard army, and the entire wild goose army was torn apart. Now, it's time to avenge our humiliation, Juan Macho shouted, raising the morale of the wild goose army. In an instant, they shouted in unison, raising the unwillingness in the hearts of the warriors of the wild goose army, and awakening the blood of the wild goose army in their bodies. The sound of battle was like thunder, and everyone's eyes were filled with hatred. It was a hatred that was countless times deeper than fierce goose sect. Everyone overcame the fear in their hearts and charged forward. At the same time, G. Russian also raised the fighting spirit of the warriors of fierce goose sect. With the encouragement of Lin Feng's spear, it was like adding the finishing touch, completely changing the situation. For freedom and survival, the warriors of fierce goose sect unleashed their strongest strength, suppressing their inner demons and charging forward. At this moment, the wild goose army and fierce goose sect were no longer enemies, but allies. They were not willing to wait for death. The war was completely ignited with Lin Feng's spear. Tens of millions of warriors charged towards the hundreds of thousands of wizard army, and the most shocking battle in the history of wild goose army broke out. It was a battle for survival. Third update added at 0:00. Chapter 718. The war had completely broken out. It was far more intense and cruel than the battle between Fierce Yin School and Yenling Mansion. The Sorcerer Tribe members were fierce and ruthless. They had the upper hand in terms of individual strength, but this time, the human martial artists were extremely united. They had gathered the strongest forces of Yenling Mansion. The two forces were also erupting with strength far beyond their own for survival. Most importantly, the human army had the advantage of numbers. They had more than 10 times the number. However, not all individuals were inferior to the Sorcerer Tribe. For example, Juan Macho and Ji Xiu were not weaker than the Sorcerer Tribe members of the same level. After all, the Sorcerer Tribe members of the Star Sea level were only teenagers to the human race, especially those who had not condensed their essence chi. Their strength was far less terrifying than the human race had imagined. The human race's combat strength erupted hysterically. They were fighting for survival. Boom, boom, boom. Lin Feng's secret clone kept releasing the power of fire to help the human martial artists. After half a year of cultivation in the giant tree world, not only had the strength of his main body improved greatly, but so had the strength of his secret clone. Although he had used up all his astral power to kill the mysterious underworld sorcerer, his secret clone had inexhaustible power after activating the destined star plate. His astral power was constantly replenishing. Inexhaustible. Whoosh! Lin Feng's main body sped forward. Shuttling through the chaotic battle, Lin Feng's eyes were like lightning. Unlike his secret clone, the strength of his main body was not inexhaustible. There was a limit to his strength, so he could not waste it. In particular, there were too many powerful enemies. 4. There are 4 more Star Lords. Lin Feng's eyes were bright as he sensed deeply in his heart. The Zhurong Sorcerer Tribe, the Tianwu Sorcerer Tribe, the Gomong Sorcerer Tribe, and the most powerful Dijiang Sorcerer Tribe. Other than me, no one can kill them, including Juan Macho. Lin Feng knew very well that even if they took turns to fight and had the advantage of numbers, they would still not be able to defeat the 4 Star Lords. Whether the human race could win this battle or not depended on him. If they won, the human race would have a great chance. But if he lost, the human race would definitely lose. Fortunately, the 4 Star Lords are not gathered together. Lin Feng thought that he was lucky. Although they had formed the Sorcerer Tribe army, the Sorcerer Tribe army was not that harmonious. Just like the thousands of tribes in Yenling and Li Yin School, there would sometimes be fights between the Sorcerer Tribe. Clearly, their relationship wasn't that deep. Instead, it gave him a chance. Break them one by one. But we have to start with the strongest. Lin Feng's eyes were burning. He clearly understood. Right now, he had to digitize his efficiency and maximize it. Dejiang Magus Clan. Legend has it that the Sorcerer Tribe is one of the best. I'd like to see how strong he is. Lin Feng nodded, and his body disappeared in the air. Speed was unleashed to the extreme. His confidence increased greatly. Lin Feng's display of power gave the human army the strongest support. Following the hearts of the people was a very powerful force, including Wan Macho. Previously, he was still skeptical of Lin Feng's words. But now, even his confidence had been greatly boosted. It was really possible to defeat these Sorcerer Tribe. Half a year ago, I knew that this kid would be a huge problem for the thousands of tribes in Yanling, but I didn't expect. Wan Macho sighed in his heart. In just half a year, he has become so powerful. Not only has his strength caught up with me, but he has also left me far behind. A trace of loneliness appeared on Wan Macho's face. He suddenly shook his head and smiled bitterly. He thought in his heart and felt bitter. However, Wan Macho was not careless. One Sorcerer Tribe member after another died in his hands. Wan Macho's power was no joke at the third stage of the peak cosmic sea state. It was just that Lin Feng was too abnormal. Life is unpredictable. Who would have thought that this kid's strength would become so strong? It's actually a blessing for the thousands of tribes in Yanling. Without him, the thousands of tribes in Yanling would probably repeat the same mistake. Wan Macho sighed softly, but he felt that fate was playing with him. Originally, Lin Feng's increase in strength was a great threat to the thousands of tribes in Yanling. But now, he had become a powerful arm. So what if he destroyed the Li Yin sect and unified the Yanling mansion? In the end, they were still trampled by the Sorcerer Tribe army. The thousands of tribes in Yanling were covered in corpses. The scene of the Yanling tribe being slaughtered that day was reproduced. But what should we do in the future? Wan Macho sighed in his heart. Lin Feng's strength made him deeply afraid. It was too terrifying. Why are you thinking so much? Let's talk about other things after this war. The thousands of tribes in Yanling will definitely not lose again and let these Sorcerer Tribe members be arrogant and despotic. Wan Macho's eyes were bright. The wind followed, and his figure floated. Punch after punch, his strength completely erupted. Because of Lin Feng's existence, he had already seen the light in the darkness. He had seen the dawn. The losers in this war might not be the humans. In the sky, a man and a bird collided with each other. Dejiang's Sorcerer Tribe. Lin Feng's eyes were cold and sharp. In front of him was a Dejiang Sorcerer Tribe member who was 12 meters tall. His aura was extremely powerful. He had 4 wings, but they were different from the wings of the Gomang Warlock. Dejiang's wings were very thin, like blades, as if they could cut through space. Because of these wings, Dejiang's speed was extremely fast. Dejiang had a human face and a bird's body. His body was thin, but his appearance was terrifying. He did not have a face. His eyes, ears, mouth, and nose did not exist. His face was full of holes, and he looked terrifying. Red light flickered around his body. He flapped his wings lightly, and the space seemed to be cut open. The energy kept changing, and it was shocking. Whoosh! Whoosh! He flapped his wings. In an instant, a loud sound rang out, and Dejiang's energy completely erupted. It was a terrifying power. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes, clenched his fists, and shouted. Thunder slaughter armor. Golden lightning covered his body. His skin, bones, and muscles completely changed. Facing the most powerful existence in the Sorcerer Tribe army, Lin Feng also used all his strength and no longer held back. The Dejiang Sorcerer Tribe in front of him gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. If he was not careful, he would die without a burial ground. He was much more powerful than the Xianming Sorcerer Tribe. He was the real king of the Sorcerer Tribe army. Fight! Whether it was Wan Macho or the Xianming Sorcerer Tribe, Lin Feng was only fighting as a human, and he still kept his last trump card. But now he had completely revealed his trump card, Thunder Slaughter Armor. This was Lin Feng's most powerful trump card as a god of war. His strength and defense suddenly doubled. and the increase in speed was minimal. However, Lin Feng's attack power, especially his attack speed, had become extremely terrifying. After strengthening his most powerful weapon, Lin Feng's body was now even stronger than that of a newly advanced Star-Lord. The power of the God of War was 100%. The reason why he had not used the Thunder Slaughter armor was that there were many restrictions. Once the energy in the Golden Fate disc was used up, he would not be able to use it in a short time. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Lightning trembled. This time, as Lin Feng reached the peak Star Sea state, even the Thunder Slaughter armor was completely different. Lin Feng's senses were exceptionally clear. The feeling of thunder filled his heart. The horn on his forehead flashed with electric light, startling him. The power of this thunder is so similar. It's almost the same as my constellation power. The feeling was very clear. The appearance of the Thunder Slaughter armor changed Lin Feng's aura again. Especially with the appearance of the lightning, the feeling of the amethyst spear had completely changed. It was as excited as blood boiling. The amethyst spear had come alive. What a strong pulse. What an astonishing power. Lin Feng's eyes lit up in disbelief. This amethyst spear had a mysterious origin, and its power was terrifying. But all this time, when he used it, even the strongest move, the Goose Feather Spear art, he was in his human form. He had never used it in the state of the Thunder Slaughter armor. Now, it was like a precious painting. On the sleeping dragon's body, the most important pair of eyes lit up. Boom! The dragon woke up in an instant. Its power exploded in an instant. Clang! The purple light of the amethyst spear bloomed. As if he had a feeling, Lin Feng inexplicably used the spear. Green smoke spear art. Pong! Lin Feng felt a huge force flash in his hand, and it was extremely shocking. The space in front of him shook violently, accompanied by a violent aura. It was the unreasonable attack of the Emperor River Witch tribe. He did not notice it at all. What's going on? Lin Feng was shocked. Cutting through space, the Emperor River Witch tribe seemed to have teleported. No, it seemed to have suddenly appeared from a spatial point. Such an attack was impossible to guard against. Cold sweat dripped from his forehead, and Lin Feng felt a chill down his spine. If the amethyst spear had not reacted on its own and used the spear art realm to drive his move, he would have been seriously injured, if not killed. The Star-Lord Emperor River Witch tribe was too terrifying. But there was no time to hesitate, because the Emperor River Witch tribe disappeared again. This time, Lin Feng's mind was focused to the extreme. It's coming. His heart trembled. The amethyst spear reacted quickly again, driving his body's movements. In the world of the giant tree, the 7 moves of the green smoke spear art, which he had practiced countless times, did not need to react at all. His body automatically used it. Pung, pung, pung. After blocking 3 spears, even if his strength increased greatly, he still felt as if his hands were numb. Lin Feng's expression was extremely shocked. Too shocking. His reaction speed was not as fast as the Emperor River Witch tribe's attack speed. Fast. One word to describe it was fast. It was an extremely fast attack, an attack that shocked people. The difference in realms was obvious at this moment. So powerful. Lin Feng's eyes were deep. This feeling gave him an extreme sense of danger. The Emperor River Witch tribe in front of him was very strong, but what shocked him even more was it was the amethyst spear in his hand. It was extremely mysterious. Updated, 4th update. Chapter 719. The spear could drive the body to perform spear moves. It was unheard of. However, it was really happening in front of him. Ding, ding, ding. He blocked another 3 spears. The attack of the Dijiang wizard tribe arrived in the blink of an eye. It was as fast as the wind, making it impossible for him to react. It was as if he was fighting head-on, and suddenly, the figure in front of him disappeared. Suddenly, a light bloomed behind him, surging with killing intent. He couldn't figure out the trick at all. The entire space seemed to be under the control of the Dijiang wizard tribe. This kind of attack was extremely terrifying. Boom! The Emperor River Shaman tribe roared. This time, the power of Star-Lord was fully released. Even if the purple crystal spear could block on its own, it couldn't withstand it. Intense pain came from his chest. The Dijiang wizard tribe's attack tore through the defense of the Thunder Slaughter armor. The pain pierced his heart. Blood and pain entered his heart, but it aroused Lin Feng's fighting spirit. So what if the wizard tribe was one of the top tribes? So what if it was a Star-Lord? So what if he couldn't see the attack? He couldn't accept defeat. He couldn't lose. Boom! The intense fire of devouring condensed on the purple crystal spear. It increased the power of the purple crystal spear again. Lin Feng's expression was serious, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. The first thing he had to do was to find his traces. Otherwise, he would lose this battle without a doubt. No matter how mysterious the amethyst spear was, it could only passively block. Although it could use the spear art, it was only a reflexive block. That day, he had been diligently practicing the green smoke spear art. After practicing for a long time, the amethyst spear had remembered this feeling. However, its power was ordinary. Entering the spear was the person's consciousness entering the spear, not the spear's consciousness entering the person. The two were different. Bang! After another painful attack, Lin Feng's face was pale. The 8-star spirit treasure, Blizzard Domain, also failed. In front of a master who could control space, using a domain spirit treasure was like showing off in front of a master. The secret clone was useless at this time. The fireball couldn't capture the Dijiang wizard tribe's figure at all. In a short time, Lin Feng's body was injured in many places. Chi! Blindly resisting would only be a futile effort. There were bloody scars on his body. The attacks of the Dijiang shaman tribe were extremely sharp. If it weren't for the protection of the lightning slaughter armor and the weakening effect of this lightning, he would have already been beheaded. The Dijiang shaman race was too powerful. An opening. Where is his flaw? Lin Feng was anxious, but he could not find a flaw in the Dijiang shaman race. Perhaps there was a pattern to his appearance, and there would definitely be fluctuations in the spatial energy. But for him, his realm was not high enough. What should we do? How should we solve this? Lin Feng's expression turned serious. In a split second, another shadow appeared behind him. A swift and fierce attack shot straight toward his back. It was covered densely with the glow of lightning, and it forcefully resisted the terrifying attack from the Imperial River Shaman tribe. However, it still caused Lin Feng to seem as if he'd been struck by lightning, and his figure was blasted back like a kite with its string cut. He was heavily injured once more. There was simply no way to block it. Puff! He coughed up blood. Lin Feng once again displayed the amethyst spear in his hand. He blocked the pursuit of the Dijiang Magi, but his injuries worsened. Tragic. Blood kept flowing. In a short period of time, he was already heavily injured. If not for the protection of the lightning slaughter armor, he would have died long ago. If this goes on, I will definitely die. I can't do that. The lightning slaughter armor also had a limit. Once its energy was exhausted, the lightning slaughter armor would turn into nothingness. At that time, it would be his death. Lin Feng gritted his teeth, but he was naturally stubborn and refused to admit defeat. Moreover, he was now related to the survival of the entire Yanling prefecture. He could not lose. That's right. Lin Feng's eyes suddenly lit up. His attacks and movements rely on space. If I can destroy this layer of space, or rather, disturb this space, perhaps I can give this method a try. Lin Feng nodded. Now, he could only take the risk. Boom! An enormous fireball flew over at lightning speed. It shot straight towards the Dijiang Magi. However, the wings easily cut through the space, and the Dijiang Magi instantly disappeared. It was not unexpected. Countless fireball attacks were all for naught just like that. They could not capture the figure of the Dijiang Magi at all. But this time go. Lin Feng's eyes were extremely cold. The intense engulfing fire was released in a frenzy, forming a fierce and ferocious flame. Perhaps he could not control it with the power of a human soul, but with the amethyst spear as a medium, it was enough to release the devouring fire with his energy. Lin Feng roared. The amethyst spear was like a sharp arrow, shooting straight towards the reborn fireball. The two extreme forces collided. In an instant, boom, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. The terrifying explosion seemed to turn everything into nothingness. The violent magnetic explosion caused the surrounding space to tremble, and the airflow was chaotic. As expected, space has been disturbed. Lin Feng's lips curled into a faint smile. However, he heard the Dijiang Magi's angry roar, which was sharp and mournful. His luck was quite good. Although it was a blind cat running into a dead mouse, the magnetic explosion seemed to... It had injured the Dijiang Magi. He was unlucky. Amethyst spear, Lin Feng roared. In an instant, the horn on his forehead flashed with light. Lightning gathered, as if calling out to him. The amethyst spear instantly appeared in his hand. As expected, it's fine. Lin Feng's eyes shone. Although it was at the center of the explosion, the amethyst spear was unharmed. As expected of a purple-gray treasure, it had a lot to do with the ancient divine beast, Lightning Shao. Naturally, it would not be damaged so easily. He had made the right bet by taking a gamble. Over there. This time, Lin Feng clearly sensed the Dijiang Magi's location. He did not sense it with his human soul, but with his life soul. Boom! The reborn fireball took the lead. The flames were ferocious as they shot towards the Dijiang Magi, who seemed to be at a loss. Such a situation was probably far beyond his expectations. For a race that relied on their innate talents to fight, once the environment changed and affected their innate talents and attacks, then the result, it would be extremely terrifying. Clang! The wings flapped. The turbulence in space seemed to have blocked the Dijiang Magi's movements. He could not break through space, or perhaps, because of the turbulence in space, he did not want to break through space. However, no matter what, a flaw had finally appeared. Do you think I will be afraid of you in a head-on battle? Lin Feng's eyes shone coldly. He looked at the Dijiang Magi, who was attacking him, and no longer felt threatened. He had the absolute ability to attack him. Perhaps, even without the assistance of the power of space, the speed of the Dijiang sorcerer tribe was still at the top. His offensive and defensive capabilities were not inferior to those of the Xianming sorcerer tribe. His overall strength was definitely in the top 3 of the 12 sorcerer tribes. However, he had enough confidence. Emperor Shun's stellar energy, 10th level. Goose feather spear art. It was a bloody battle. It was indeed a bloody battle. Lin Feng's body was almost broken to the extreme. He was on the verge of death. The lightning Shao armor flickered. It had no more power and slowly disappeared. Lin Feng floated in the air, his body covered in blood. It was as if he was bathed in blood. This battle was quite tragic. As expected of the Dijiang Magi, even without the power of space, he is much stronger than the Xianming Magi. It's a pity that his pride is too strong. Lin Feng sighed. He felt that the battle just now had been very dangerous. In terms of strength, he was indeed not as strong as the Dijiang Magi. He had won because of luck. The Dijiang Magi's ability to control space was too terrifying. Even if he used the magnetic explosion in front of him, he would probably be able to escape safely. In this battle, even if space was disrupted, given the speed of the Dijiang Magi, as long as he was willing to escape, he would not be able to catch up. However, his pride was too strong. He would rather die than escape. Master said that the Dijiang Magi are like the royal family of the Magi. Every Dijiang Magi is extremely arrogant, and this is his biggest flaw. Lin Feng smiled faintly, feeling as if a huge rock had been lifted from his heart. He had killed 2 of the 5-star Lord Magi, and the strongest of them was dead. His chances of winning this battle were more than 50%. However, I won't be able to fight for the time being, Lin Feng thought. He felt exhausted all over. The injuries to his body were just too severe. Even with the Phoenix's blood constantly repairing his wounds, it was difficult to stop his injuries from worsening. The tremendous power of the Emperor's river shaman tribe continued to seep into his body, like a powerful poison that was gnawing away at his body. I have to find a place to recuperate. Then I'll use the devouring fire to remove it slowly. Lin Feng thought. This was not the first time he had encountered such a situation. Suddenly, Lin Feng turned around. Behind him, a familiar figure landed in front of him. He had a shocked expression on his face as his eyes flashed. Wan Macho. Her eyes contained all kinds of complicated emotions. You killed the king of the Magi army, the Jiang Magi. Wan Macho's voice trembled. She looked straight into Lin Feng's eyes. Others might not have sensed it, but how could someone as strong as Wan Macho not have sensed such an intense battle and such shocking battle waves? Yes, Lin Feng nodded. He didn't deny it. His answer was brief, but made Wan Macho's heart tremble. The Star-Lord Magi were already extremely terrifying, not to mention the Jiang Magi, who were Star-Lord Magi. They were terrifying beings who could easily slaughter 10 times the number of other Magi. They were the real royal family of the Magi. But now, they were killed by a puny human being. Wan Macho felt goosebumps all over her body. She looked at Lin Feng in horror. Where did he come from? How could he have such terrifying power? Lin Feng's injuries were very serious. His body was completely destroyed. It was very dangerous under such circumstances. Their eyes met, but the relationship between Lin Feng and Wan Macho was inexplicable. If she wanted to fight, now was the best chance. Wan Macho's eyes were cold and bright. She clenched her fists, surrounded by brown starlight. Bang! Her killing intent was obvious. First update. Chapter 720. Leave this to me. Let's go. Wan Macho's eyes glinted coldly as she stared ahead. Countless members of the sorcerer tribe surged over, and among them, there were quite a number of Star Sea level members of the Emperor River Sorcerer tribe. Although their strength was far from the Emperor River Sorcerer tribes, with such a large formation, it was easy to kill the severely injured Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled. You don't want to kill me? Whoosh! A gust of wind blew past. Wan Macho stood in front of Lin Feng and shouted coldly, Who do you think I am? As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward like a sharp arrow without any hesitation. Although you're an enemy, not a friend. You're an enemy worthy of respect. Lin Feng smiled faintly before he turned around and left. Wan Macho had saved his life. In front of him, the flames were ferocious. Lin Feng looked calm as his secret clone led the way. So what if they were sorcerers? Today, he was fully deserving of the title of Yinling Manners, the most powerful. The war was still going on. As this shocking news spread, the fighting spirit of the warriors of the Wild Goose Feather tribe and the Fierce Goose School who were fighting with all their might instantly soared. Lin Feng, the king who killed the sorcerer army, a star-lord from Dijiang sorcerer tribe. The morale of the human warriors was at its peak. On the contrary, the morale of the sorcerers dropped a lot. The death of the king did not make them angry or hateful. Instead, it made the proud and arrogant sorcerers feel distracted and uneasy. It was a kind of hesitation. Their hearts began to waver. All along, humans had been their vassals and prey. But now they began to resist. The sorcerers suddenly realized that humans had the strength to resist them. Perhaps they were not strong individually, but it was 10 against 1, 100 against 1. The biggest advantage of the humans was fully displayed. There were many of them, tens of millions of Star Sea level warriors against hundreds of thousands of sorcerers. The number was more than 10 times. Moreover, not all of the sorcerers were Star Sea level. More than half of them were Star River level. Kill. Everyone kill. The sorcerers are scared. The sorcerers are scared. Ha ha ha. We're definitely going to win. The morale of the human martial artists was extremely high. As the sorcerer tribesmen fell one by one, the situation on the battlefield became more and more in favor of the human ancient martial art practitioners. This was because the number of people was gradually increasing. It was a terrible tilt. Boom! Another body, over 10 meters tall, fell down. Lin Feng's face was pale, but he put on a feeble smile. He had killed the third Star Lord of the Sorcerers, Zhu Rong Magus Clan. Except for the Dijiang Magus Clan, the Zhu Rong Magus Clan was the biggest threat to Ji Hao. He would never have thought that he would be able to kill a Star Lord Zhu Rong when he had just entered the battle spirit world. But now he had actually done it. The bodies of the Sorcerer tribe are indeed tough, Lin Feng murmured. After absorbing the original firepower, the bodies of Zhu Rong Magi clan people had become especially strong, both in terms of defensive power and toughness. Coupled with the fact that he was unable to use fire attacks, this battle could be said to be a confrontation, and it was difficult to determine the victor. However, he had won in the end. The sorcerers have a fatal weakness. Lin Feng's eyes lit up. Perhaps they have intelligence, but they lack training. They have strong combat power, but they don't know how to use it. I have to strengthen my combat power to the maximum. In this regard, the human martial artists were better than the sorcerers. Human martial artists were constantly in battle, and their strength had been tempered thousands of times. In terms of strength, not to mention the Star Lord Dijiang Magus Clan, the Zhu Rong Magus Clan alone was many times stronger than Ji Hao, not to mention that his fire attacks were completely restrained. However, Ji Hao was the one who had the last laugh. There are two more, the Tianwu Magus Clan and the Gomong Magus Clan. Lin Feng smiled. His body was severely injured, and his god of war strength was less than 10%, and he was almost unable to continue. However, he was still quite confident in defeating the remaining two-star Lord Magi. Yinling Prefecture. At this moment, it was chaos. Everyone was in a state of panic. Everyone was scared to the point that their faces were deathly pale, and they were incomparably shocked. The sorcerers were here. Aetherfoam City, a small city in the south of Yinling Prefecture. That day, the sorcerers had almost razed this place to the ground and slaughtered everyone. However, because of the battle between Fierce Yin Sect and Yinling Prefecture, the intense killing intent and blood had completely attracted the sorcerers' army. Therefore, many martial artists and residents had escaped the calamity. There was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world, not to mention a serious matter like the sorcerers' invasion. As the martial artists who had escaped the calamity in Aetherfoam City scattered throughout Yinling Prefecture, the news spread like wildfire in a short period of time. Soon, it affected the entire Yinling Prefecture. The arrival of the sorcerers' army was the true end of the world. Run, run. Oh my God, I don't want to become food for the sorcerers. Who can save us? People cried and screamed, and everyone was terrified to the extreme. The sorcerer's reputation spread far and wide, and everyone knew how powerful the sorcerers were. That day, the Yinling Prefecture was massacred by the sorcerers, and the entire Yinling Prefecture was almost destroyed. This legend quickly spread everywhere, causing the people of Yinling Prefecture to be even more afraid and terrified. The end of the world was coming, and there was no hope of survival. That was the sorcerers. According to the legends, they were the absolute rulers of the human race. Who could fight against them? Escape? Yinling Prefecture was so big, so was it absolutely safe. Who could fight against them? Before Lin Feng's arrival, there was no one. However, after Lin Feng's arrival, there was the first one. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion. Terrifying flames filled the surroundings, blasting everything into nothingness and shattering them into pieces. The sky was dyed fiery red, and the surrounding space was in chaos. The airflow was like ripples, and there was no sense of direction at all. This place had now become a wasteland. Its power was extremely great. There was only silence. Only Lin Feng was floating in the air. He looked exhausted, and his gaze was slightly blurry. Finally, it's over. Lin Feng was completely relieved. He was seriously injured, and his body was badly mutilated. There was almost no piece of skin that was intact. The last magnetic explosion had used up the last of his strength, and it was as if he was exhausted. Not to mention attacking, Even moving would make his body feel like it was about to fall apart. His body had completely collapsed. He was like a broken piece of porcelain, falling apart into pieces. However, Lin Feng's lips were brimming with a smile. The 5-star Lord sorcerers are all dead. Wan Macho should be able to take care of the rest with her strength. I've accomplished my mission and retired. Lin Feng smiled weakly, feeling a sense of security. Since the beginning of the war, he had known that the 5-star Lord sorcerers would be the biggest threat. But now the threat was gone. The last magnetic explosion had blown 2-star Lord from the Tianwu sorcerer tribe and the Gomong sorcerer tribe into pieces, but it had also used up the last of his strength. He had first fought the Xianming sorcerer tribe and then the Dijiang sorcerer tribe. He was already badly injured, and then he fought the Zhurong sorcerer tribe, which worsened his injuries. But now, I'm afraid I'll have to rest for a while. Lin Feng curled his lips. His injuries were so serious that he couldn't bear to see it. However, it was worth it. There's a huge gap between the Star Sea level and the Star Lord level of the sorcerers. Now the human warriors have the upper hand. As long as we can hold on, we'll win in the end. Feeling exhausted and weak, Lin Feng suddenly closed his eyes. Whoosh! With a flash of light, the secret clone took it. The flames surrounded it and disappeared in an instant. The 5 auras have all disappeared. He really did it. Floating in the air, Wan Macho's eyes glittered. The wind followed, and the airflow was constantly changing. Wan Macho was like the son of wind, fighting in a relaxed manner. Every time he made a move, he would kill a member of the sorcerer tribe. The other warriors were all envious and reverent of him. Her strength was far beyond the Star Sea level. She was too strong. I thought that when you said 100%, it was just encouragement and hope. I didn't expect it to be true. Wan Macho's eyes were bright, and her heart was very light. The current situation was under the control of the human warriors. After losing the 5 leaders, the morale of the sorcerer's army plummeted. There was no way to turn the situation around. All this was because of one person, Lin Feng. I can't compare to you, Lin Feng. Wan Macho's eyes glittered, and she sighed. Her floating figure looked very lonely. You're the real strongest person in Yinling Mansion. After this battle, Wan Macho was completely convinced. Lin Feng's strength had completely convinced her. The war was over. As the remaining tens of thousands of sorcerers fled, the human warriors burst into deafening cheers. We won, haha. We won. We really won. Yes, haha. We actually defeated the sorcerers. Countless warriors were so happy that they even cried tears of joy. Countless warriors hugged each other excitedly. Regardless of whether it was the Wild Goose Feather Tribe or the Fierce Goose School, the hatred between them completely vanished at this moment. Defeating the common enemy, defeating the legendary existence, everyone felt as if their hearts were liberated. For a long time, all humans have been living under the shadow of the sorcerers. The sorcerers were the rulers of humans. But now they finally won, especially the people of the Yinling tribe. Countless of them knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the sky. Even Wan Macho was floating in the air, looking up at the sky. A line of clear tears fell from the corner of her eyes. Ancestor, we won. We finally defeated the sorcerers and took revenge. Wan Macho's heart was very calm. At this moment, he was completely satisfied. No one knew how much pressure he was under. With the entire Yinling tribe on his shoulders, Wan Macho did something that all the people of the Yinling tribe did not dare to do. Against the sorcerers. If he failed, he would become a sinner of the Yinling tribe. But he won the bet. This was definitely a battle that would be recorded in the history books. Humans had defeated the sorcerers, which was rare. Second update, third update 000. Chapter 721. The news spread quickly. All the martial artists in Yinling Prefecture were stunned. Their panicked faces were instantly filled with joy and surprise. Everyone was bursting with joy. The huge stone in his heart was finally lifted. Have you heard? The million-strong sorcerer tribe army was defeated. Yes, my cousin is in Fierce Goose sect. That battle was fierce. They fought for 3 days and 3 nights. Blood flowed like a river. Let me tell you, that was the new sect master of Fierce Goose sect, Lin Feng. He took the head of the king of the sorcerer tribe and defeated the entire sorcerer tribe army single-handedly. Different versions of the story were spread in every city. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and the more it spread, the more exaggerated and ridiculous it became. However, it was undeniable that everyone in Yinling Prefecture was filled with joy and excitement. It was the joy of surviving a disaster. Lin Feng's name was known in Yinling Prefecture. From lonely old men to 3-year-old children, there was no one who did not know this hero. He was the true hero who saved Yinling Prefecture. Fierce Goose sect. Are you kidding? Lin Feng smiled bitterly. It's true, Lindigo. Qin Xianqian's beautiful eyes glowed as she giggled. You don't know that everyone is talking about you. Everyone knows that you're the hero who saved Yinling Prefecture. Many girls think of you as their Prince Charming, their dream lover. Stop. Lin Feng shook his head. Although he did contribute, it wasn't that exaggerated, right? Lin Feng looked at Zhu Ling's valiant face and glanced at her. You did it again, second senior brother? I'm innocent. Zhu Ling was shocked and jumped up. Who else could it be? Lin Feng frowned. You just did it a few days ago. Zhu Ling was the one who secretly took a video of him killing the Star Lord Xiaming sorcerer. After the battle, Zhu Ling sent the video out. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100. Now almost every city in Yinling Prefecture had the video. Hey, isn't that to help you spread your name? Zhu Ling blinked. Second senior brother. Lin Feng couldn't do anything about Zhu Ling. His second senior brother had always been so frivolous. And at this moment, outside the door, Ji Russian and Ji Jin walked in with smiles on their faces. Little junior brother, you've wronged second junior brother this time. Master, eldest senior brother. Lin Feng nodded. I was the one who got someone to release the news this time. Ji Jin smiled and said, Feng, the video of your battle with the Dark Underworld Shaman clan has become very famous, and it's time to strike while the iron is hot. Your master will increase your fame and take advantage of the situation. Firstly, it will intimidate the thousands of Wild Goose Feather clan, and secondly, it will increase Fierce Goose School's reputation. You don't mind, do you? Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. Of course not. He completely understood his master's intentions, even though he didn't want to do it. However, if he could help Lian School, it did not matter. Anyway, he was going to stay in Yinling Manor and Lian School for a while. He would help as much as he could. The effect is very obvious. Ji Russian nodded with a smile. Because of you, little junior brother, more and more martial artists have come to join Fierce Goose School these days. Many of them came because of your reputation. In the coming days, Fierce Goose School's reputation will be the best in the entire Yinling Manor, and even outshine the thousands of Wild Goose Feather clan. Lin Feng smiled and nodded slightly. To be honest, the power struggle in Yinling Manor was not attractive to him at all. After this battle, Wan Macho had completely thought it through and was no longer obsessed with the power struggle. Or rather, Wan Macho had fulfilled her responsibility to the family. She had succeeded and no longer needed to do things that he felt were meaningless. The true path of a martial artist is to search for the heavenly Tao and find oneself. Thank you, Lin Feng. Lin Feng could not help but smile calmly as he recalled what Wan Macho had said to him after the battle that day. Between them, a smile would erase all enmity. Master, how's your body? Lin Feng looked at Ji Jin and asked with concern. He was still most worried about his master. His meridians were all broken. Even if his master had taken the healing 8-star immortal fruit, it could only temporarily delay his injuries. Don't worry, I'm fine. Ji Jin nodded with a smile. I can't practice martial arts or fight for the time being. I can handle some sect affairs. Looking at Ji Russian, Ji Jin smiled and said, You could take advantage of this time to help your eldest senior brother familiarize himself with and control Fierce Goose School. Even if half a year. Ji Jin sighed softly and smiled. Look at me. I become so long-winded when I'm old. Don't worry, master. I'll definitely come back with a 9-star immortal fruit in half a year. Lin Feng's eyes brightened. Ji nodded. Even if my strength can be fully recovered, it's time to hand over the sect to Russian. Looking at Lin Feng, Ji Jin smiled and said, Feng, you don't mind, right? Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. Eldest senior brother is the most suitable candidate. Although he was the sect master in name to the outside world, it was actually his eldest senior brother who was in charge of the sect affairs. Moreover, he didn't like being the sect master. To him, power was far less important than strength. Dealing with sect affairs was far less interesting than cultivating. Most importantly, he would enter the Yinling royal mansion in half a year. It would be about time for him to leave. It was time for him to head to the Vermilion Bird Continent in the southern region, the 9 provinces of the human race. That was where the true elites of the human race gathered. That place had the true history and heritage of the human race. It was completely different from the mansion that could be destroyed at any time. In the Yinling royal mansion, every cultivator cultivated desperately in order to enter the 9 provinces. In fact, only cultivators of the Star Lord level were truly qualified to enter. As for himself, Vermilion Bird Continent, Sherluo County. It's also time for me to find out about my origins and my roots. Lin Feng's eyes brightened. He was looking forward to it. However, before that, he still had many things to do. Fierce Yin School, intersect. At the edge of a beautiful and picturesque lake, a barefooted short-haired girl was splashing on the water. Her neat bangs perfectly framed her peach-shaped face. Her face, which should have been blooming with a happy smile, had a hint of worry. Qian, what are you thinking about, junior sister? Behind her, a young man with 2 swords on his back slowly walked over. His indigo eyes shone faintly. It was Ji Xia. Walking to Qian's side, Ji Xia smiled slightly and sat down. Senior brother, Qian called softly, but her expression was still unhappy. Our little princess also has worries. Ji Xia smiled. Don't make fun of me, senior brother. Qian rested her chin on her hand and curled her cherry lips. Qian is very troubled. Ji Xia smiled and said, You're troubled about Brother Lin, right? Qian was surprised. How did you know, senior brother? You and I grew up together. How could you hide it from me? Ji Xia rubbed Qian's little head. His expression was full of affection. He had always treated Qian as his own sister. Is it because Brother Lin is about to leave and hasn't told you? Qian shook her head. Linda Ge mentioned to me a long time ago that he would take me with him. Ji Xia nodded with satisfaction. Isn't that good? What's there to worry about? Pursing her lips, Qian said softly, Do you know, senior brother, Sister Linglong is actually not from Yinling School. Qian and Shui Linglong had gone through life and death together in the Yinling Imperial residence, and even cultivated together. Not only did they spend 1,000 days in the 4th heavenly layer, they even cultivated together for 10,000 days in the 5th heavenly layer. Qian and Shui Linglong had already become sworn sisters. Oh, Ji Xia was surprised. Sister Linglong came to Fierce Yin School this time to train, Qian said softly. Ji Xia's eyes flickered. She's going back? Qian nodded. Before she left, she told me that she gained a lot from this trip to Yinling School and learned a lot of things. Because of this, she made up her mind to go home and take the toughest test. She wants to improve her strength and doesn't want to be a burden to others. Ji Xia hummed softly. She understood what Qian meant. Everyone has their own path to walk. Ji Xia nodded. Qian's beautiful eyes flickered as she murmured. After a long time, she turned to look at Ji Xia and smiled. Thank you, senior brother. Qian has thought it through. That's good. Ji Xia smiled. You've decided? Lin Feng looked at Qian. Yes, Linda Ge. Qian nodded and smiled. Silly girl, don't think too much. You won't be a burden to me. Lin Feng caressed her smooth face and said softly. He had already guessed what Qin Xianqian was thinking. Therefore, he had already mentioned it to prevent her from thinking too much. But he didn't expect. Qin Xianqian smiled sweetly. No, Linda Gu. Xianqian is almost 18 years old. It's time for me to return to the Chamber of Commerce. There was a trace of reluctance in her voice. Lin Feng sighed. How could this little girl's behavior hide from him? But this time, Qin Xianqian seemed to have made up her mind. No matter how he tried to persuade her, it was useless. It seemed that she had really grown up. All right, Lin Feng smiled. Anyway, we're all in the 9 states of the southern region. It'll be convenient for us to meet. In his heart, there was also a slight reluctance. But now was not the time to indulge in love. There were still many things waiting for him to do, especially since he had never been to the Vermilion Bird continent. There were too many uncertainties. It was indeed better for Qin Xianqian to return to the Qin Chamber of Commerce first. Yes. Qin Xianqian smiled sweetly. Don't worry, Linda Gu. Senior brother will also follow me to the Yellow Crane continent. We could take care of each other. Lin Feng nodded. He knew what Ji Xiao was thinking. Instead of being mediocre in the Yanling Prefecture, it was better to go to the 9 states and fight. After entering the Qin Chamber of Commerce, Qianqian would take care of him. At least, his future would be much brighter than in the Yanling Prefecture. But Qin Qianqian gazed at Lin Feng. Her eyes flashed with affection. She bit her cherry lips and said softly, Linda Gu, I don't know how long we'll be apart. Before I leave, can you fulfill one of my wishes? Third update. Chapter 722. Fiercian sect was huge. In terms of size, it was no smaller than Sky Marshall Continent. In terms of scenery, it was extremely beautiful. Beautiful mountains and clear waters could be seen everywhere. It was refreshing. Linda, go look. That's the biggest lake in the 96th district, Gold Lake. I heard that every noon, the lake would emit a faint golden light, just like the light emitted by the gold fragments in the gold mines. That's how it got its name. Qin Xianqian pointed into the distance and said happily, I see. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled as he looked at the lake in the distance and smiled. Holding Qin Xianqian's hand, he strolled through the beautiful scenery to calm his heart. After the continuous killings, he had also been infected with some crazy and negative emotions. Relaxing once in a while can loosen up the tense nerves. Linda Gu, let's go boating. Qin Xianqian's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light. Let's go, Lin Feng smiled. Hey, that's great. Qin Xianqian happily held Lin Feng's hand and tiptoed to kiss Lin Feng lightly. Feeling the remaining warmth on his cheek, Lin Feng felt a warm current in his heart. Ever since he entered Fiercian's sect, he had not accompanied Qianqian properly. He had indeed neglected her. Fortunately, Qianqian had never been calculative and had been silently contributing behind his back. He was really touched by her sincerity. Let's relax for 3 days. We'll tour the entire Fiercian sect, Lin Feng smiled. This was Qianqian's last wish before she left. Accompanied by the person she loved the most, she wanted to tour the place where she grew up and leave behind the best memories. This trip to Yellow Crane Province, there was a high possibility that she would not return to Yanling Prefecture. She was extremely reluctant to leave. Thank you, Linda Gu. Qin Xianqian leaned on Lin Feng and closed her eyes warmly. Although she knew that as long as she asked, Lin Feng would agree to any wish, but this was enough. Boating on lakes, climbing mountains, picking fruits, planting trees. Lin Feng and Qin Xianqian spent 3 days together. It was a heartwarming time for the two of them. They spent 24 hours a day together, feeling each other's warmth and feeling each other's feelings. It was as if they were the only 2 people left in the world. After all, Qin Xianqian was not yet 18 years old, and the two of them had not yet held a wedding ceremony. According to the rules of the 9 provinces, a woman would only be considered an adult at the age of 18 and could marry. However, this would not affect the feelings between 2 people. Sometimes, pure spiritual love would make them rely on each other and reluctant to part with each other. It was a long kiss, and it took a long time for their lips to part. Qin Xianqian hugged Lin Feng tightly, burying her head in Lin Feng's arms and closing her eyes. Silly girl, why bother? Lin Feng gently stroked Qin Xianqian's hair. He could completely feel the little girl's inner struggle and reluctance. She didn't want to leave him, but she didn't want to be his burden. Come with me to the Vermilion Bird Continent, Xianqian, Lin Feng said gently. I will take care of you. Qin Xianqian shook her head gently and did not speak. However, this action meant that this time, Xianqian's determination was very strong and unshakable. Sighing in his heart, Lin Feng closed his eyes and did not say anything else after sensing the feelings of the beautiful woman. If he said too much, it would make him seem pretentious. Xianqian had grown up. Brother Ji, then I'll have to trouble you. Lin Feng nodded gently. Don't worry, Brother Lin. I treat Xianqian like my own sister, Ji Xia said with a smile. This separation will take at least 1.5 years, and at most 5 to 7 years. You have to take good care of yourself, and don't let me worry. If you have the chance, come to the Qin Chamber of Commerce in the Yellow Crane Continent. I will. Lin Feng smiled. He looked at Qin Xianqian. Their eyes met, and everything was understood without words. Xianqian knew his feelings very well. After things settled down and he finished what he had to do in the Vermilion Bird Continent, he would definitely go to the Yellow Crane Continent to propose marriage and marry Qin Xianqian officially. That day, he treated Zi Yao like that. In the future, he would treat Xianqian like that. As a man, since he had said it, he had to do it. That was his promise. Wait for me, Xianqian, Lin Feng said seriously. Yes, Linda go. Qin Xianqian nodded with tears in her beautiful eyes. They hugged each other deeply, feeling each other's warmth and remembering the familiar smell. In their hearts, they were extremely reluctant to part, but they still said the word goodbye. Qin Xianqian left as if something was missing. Closing his eyes, Lin Feng focused on his cultivation. The injuries on his body were gradually recovering. In the battle with the Magi army, he had exhausted his mental strength and his body and mind were severely injured. However, at least he had won. Moreover, my injuries are not as serious as last time, Lin Feng murmured softly. Last time, when he fought against Juan Macho, he was even more seriously injured. In the end, he barely escaped with the help of the wind escape. Thinking about it, he felt quite nostalgic. He didn't expect to make such great progress in such a short time. He had already forgotten about Juan Macho. Not to mention that he was only at the peak of the Star Sea state. Even if Juan Macho became a Star Lord, he was absolutely confident. One move to defeat him. While thinking, Lin Feng's eyebrows relaxed, and he couldn't help but smile. What he thought came true. You are a guest. Leader Juan, don't you want to come in and have a seat? Lin Feng said indifferently and suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, a shadow flashed in front of him, bringing a gust of wind. His entire person seemed to have merged with the wind. Both his expression and temperament were completely different from before. With sparkling eyes, Juan Macho walked over with a faint smile on her face. What a sharp perception. Brother Lin, you're indeed not the same as before. Isn't it the same for you, Leader Juan? Lin Feng's eyes flashed. You made a breakthrough so quickly? Juan Macho nodded. In fact, I should have made the breakthrough long ago, but before, Juan Macho chuckled and said, forget it. I don't want to talk about what happened before. Besides, I'm no longer Leader Juan. Huh? Lin Feng was surprised. Have you forgotten what I said to you 10 days ago? Juan Macho smiled. Worldly fame and power are no longer important to me. I've also let go of my grudge against the fierce Yin school. I'm just a pure warrior now, a man who pursues the ultimate of martial arts. I am myself, Juan Macho. Juan Macho stared at Lin Feng with his burning eyes. Their eyes met. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Congratulations, Brother Juan. After the battle with the fierce Yin school, the grudge between him and Juan Macho had long been erased. He was happy to see such a change in Juan Macho. At least, there was one less enemy. Brother Lin, I'm here to say goodbye to you. Juan Macho smiled valiantly. He took out a wine pot and put on the table with a thud. Would you do me the honor of drinking and chatting with me? Let's get to know each other again and be friends? Lin Feng opened the lid of the wine pot with his right hand and smiled. My pleasure. Brother Wan, you're not going to the Great Yin continent. Lin Feng was surprised. Yes, I don't want to live under the shadow of my family anymore. Wan Macho said seriously, after the battle with the shaman tribe, I've thought it through. Family is different from sect. Family is like a shackle that locks me, preventing me from leaving that area. Besides, I don't want to be caught in the endless power struggle. Lin Feng nodded. He understood. His master had mentioned this to him before. Fierce Yin School had many seniors in the Great Yin continent. Fierce Yin School had Yinling tribe, so did Yinling tribe. In fact, the Great Yin continent was the closest to Yinling Prefecture among the 9 continents of the southern region. Therefore, there were many seniors of Yinling Prefecture there. However, these Yinling Prefecture used to be the top existences, but they were nothing in the 9 continents. Just the Great Yin continent alone had tens of thousands of prefectures around it. Yinling Prefecture was only one in 10,000 of them. And these tens of thousands of prefectures were only a small part of the Great Yin continent. In the 9 continents, even a county was quite impressive, let alone a continent. The elite warriors of Yinling Prefecture, as strong as the 2 top forces of Yinling tribe and Fierce Yin School, were only insignificant forces in Fengyan County of Great Yin Continent. They also had to act according to the mood of others. Wan Macho had his reasons for not wanting to go to the Great Yin Continent. Why should he put himself in a birdcage when he was free to fly? What do you plan to do, Brother Wan? Lin Feng nodded. Wan Macho picked up the wine cup in his hand and drank it in one gulp. His eyes lit up. I have more than 30 million points in Yinling Prefecture. I could go to 4 of the 9 continents of the southern region. Apart from the Great Yin Continent, I'm still considering Yellow Crane Prefecture, Vermilion Burr Prefecture, and Small Spring Prefecture. I haven't decided yet. Lin Feng grunted softly. He understood. The 9 continents were not connected. Instead, they were scattered in every corner of the southern region. There were tens of thousands of prefectures around each prefecture. If they were to zoom in, the entire southern region, including the 9 prefectures and these prefectures, was only the tip of the iceberg. The real southern region was vast and boundless. Most of it was occupied by the wizard tribe and the ancient tribe. The 9 prefectures, including these countless prefectures, were less than 1% of the total land. The further one was from the 9 prefectures, the higher the points needed to reach them. Brother Wan, if you can't decide, why don't you consider going to the Vermilion Bird Prefecture? Lin Feng raised his wine cup and smiled. We don't know each other until we fight. We could be considered friends. When we enter the Vermilion Bird Prefecture, we might be able to look after each other. Oh, Wan Macho's eyes lit up. He nodded thoughtfully. In a new and unfamiliar environment, it's a blessing to have more friends to help me. Wan Macho smiled. Anyway, as long as I don't go to the Great Yin continent, it doesn't matter where I go. The Vermilion Bird Prefecture. It's not bad. Then it's settled. Lin Feng raised his wine cup and smiled. Okay. Wan Macho also raised his wine cup and smiled. They drank to each other. They didn't know each other until they fought. Part 1, Part 2, 1900 hours that you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.